Chapter 444. Just as the golden-haired man continued to accumulate his powers. On the other side, Lianping was also caught in a pincer attack from the caped man and the monkey. The caped man's strength and speed had both reached light speed, and his body was many times tougher than white short stars. No matter how Lianping attacked, the caped man would always be in front of him. He was like a knight, fending off all of Lianping's attacks. On the other hand, the monkey was like a spirit. Not only did he possess astonishing regenerative abilities, but he could also take on all sorts of forms. He kept on circling around Lianping and the caped man, performing all sorts of attacks. He would either take on the form of a phoenix, a huge dragon, a kirin, or other legendary creatures. He would also take on the form of hurricanes, flames, thunderbolts, and other formless objects. He kept on using all sorts of attacking methods to attack Lianping. With a tui sound, the monkey spat out a mouthful of saliva toward Lianping. The saliva instantly turned into a demonic acid that was 10 million times more acidic than aqua regia. However, rather than saying that such a terrifying attack was an attack, it was more like an insult to Lianping and himself. Lianping waved his hand gently and turned the demonic acid into a stream of green smoke. "Lad, you're quite capable." At the same time that Fang Xinjian's fists and legs were clashing with the caped man, the monkey had already transformed once again, creating thousands or even tens of thousands of clones that surrounded and attacked the two of them. The strength of each of the clones was in no way inferior to that of the original body. After the staff came smashing down, Lianping took the initiative to disperse his body, dodging the pincer attack from the man and monkey. He then turned into countless photons and moved several thousand kilometers away, reassembling his body once again. However, even with his movements that were close to light speed, he was unable to shake off any of the three people before him, resulting in a reduction in numbers. Needless to say, the caped man chased after Lianping at light speed as he moved, smashing a punch fiercely onto Lianping's chest. The speed of the monkey holding the cudgel wasn't slow either. With a somersault, it crossed thousands of kilometers and arrived behind Lianping. The cudgel carried wind, fire, and thunder as it stabbed towards Lianping's back. The other golden-haired man, who had not made a move, pressed his finger between his eyebrows. His body flashed, and he appeared around the three people who were fighting. "There's no way to escape like this," the man in the cape reminded him. "You have to think of a way to directly carry out a large-scale movement in space or time, only then will you be able to separate us." However, although he was reminding him out of goodwill, his physical attacks were merciless. Amidst the encirclement, the caped man blocked Lianping's attack. Monkey was responsible for harassing Lianping. As for the blond man, what a troublesome fellow. Lianping glanced at the blond man. The energy in his opponent's body was like a volcano that was about to erupt. It was growing crazily at every moment, as if it was accumulating energy in preparation for some kind of attack. If we allow him to continue accumulating, it will be too dangerous. On Earth, in Beijing, the Chaos Tide and the Four Worlds Desire were still at their original positions. Before them was the image of Lianping fighting the three people. Seeing that Lianping was at a disadvantage under the combined attacks of the caped man and monkey, the Four Worlds Desire laughed. "If you continue to fight like this, your seed will wither." The Chaos Tide was unconcerned. "What's the hurry? This is just the beginning." To them, this can't even be considered a warm-up. The Four Worlds Desire let out a cold snort. "I'll see how stubborn you are. Let me make things clear first. These three warriors that I've personally trained have taken up a lot of my time and resources. They're a lot stronger than what you can imagine." While Lianping, the monkey, and the man in the cape were engaged in battle, they had already traveled several 10 million kilometers. In just a few minutes, the four of them had turned from a battlefield of endless flames and high temperatures into a void of space. Their battle also completely turned into a pantomime. During this process, the caped man was completely unscathed. Lianping regenerated his body many times, while the monkey kept on regenerating his body that had been smashed by Lianping. During this period, Lianping's body emitted white light several times. He wanted to activate the radiant glass fire, but the other party's speed was too fast and it was hard for him to lock onto him. This was especially so for the caped man. After trying out ultra-high temperatures, ultra-low temperatures, antimatter explosions, and quantum vacuum punches, the other party's body was completely unscathed. Until now, Lianping still had not found a way to hurt the other party. It was the same for the monkey. Although he had smashed the other party into minced meat countless times, the other party's undying body did not seem to be any weaker than Lianping's. After each regeneration, the other party did not show any signs of weakening. Just then, there were changes on the golden-haired man's side. As golden auras surged, his hair grew longer once again, and the eyebrows on his forehead disappeared completely. His figure also became stronger, and his muscles seemed like they were going to explode. The energy in the other party's body had reached a level that even Lianping was surprised. The corners of the golden-haired man's lips curled up into a faint smile, and he stretched out his palm toward where Lianping and the other two were. At the next moment, a golden light burst out from the man's palm. It was even fiercer than laser cannons and even more domineering than positron cannons. When the light wave darted out from the man's palm, it expanded at an astonishing speed. By the time it arrived before Lianping and the other two, it had already turned into a light pillar that was several thousand kilometers in thickness. The light pillar's brightness could even be seen clearly from Earth a few hours later. Encompassed by this light pillar, other than the caped man with the S symbol on his chest and Lianping, the monkey had already disappeared. However, very soon, a lump of minced meat gathered together in the universe's vacuum. A monkey's head grew out from the lump of meat and bellowed furiously, "It's so damn painful!" Although sound was unable to be transmitted in the universe's vacuum, the monkey's enraged will transmitted its message to the few people present. Simultaneously, the caped man's countenance changed, and he punched out with the light-speed fist, dispersing Lianping's body that had just reassembled. However, very soon, even more Lianping appeared before the trio's vision. The caped man and the monkey performed the light-speed fist. One of them stirred the cudgel in his hand that was already 10,000 kilometers long, and they attacked the increasing number of Lianping in void space. If the caped man is a tank, then the monkey is a bandit, and that golden hedgehog head is a mage. Such thoughts flashed through Fang Xinjian's mind, and unknowingly, a stream of light had already encompassed the golden-haired man's back. The caped man and the monkey's reactions were also very fast, and they immediately rushed toward the golden-haired man. However, how could Lianping, who was also traveling at light speed, possibly give them the chance to do so? The quantum vacuum ring smashed out fiercely toward the golden-haired man's chest. Just as Fang Xinjian thought, the golden-haired man's physical toughness was a far cry from the two people from earlier, be it in terms of speed or power. Lianping's punch landed on the golden-haired man's body without any fancy moves. The quantum vacuum fist smashed into the golden-haired man's chest like a planet. However, a layer of dense golden aura burst out from the golden-haired man's body at the same time. The two gushes of unrivaled power clashed together, and Lianping was instantly sent flying. A huge hole also appeared on the golden-haired man's chest. His energy attacks are a lot stronger than those of the two people from earlier, but his physical attributes are a lot weaker than theirs. Just as Lianping was thinking about this, a green light appeared on the golden-haired man's chest. As the green light grew, the golden-haired man's chest once again returned to its original state. By then, the man in the cape had already arrived next to Lianping. He blew a breath of cold air onto Lianping's body, instantly lowering the temperature to -250 degrees Celsius. On the other side, Monkey, who had followed closely behind, also opened his mouth and spat out 3 streams of flames that were formed from essence, chi, and spirit shot out from his eyes, nose, and mouth. They started burning on Lianping's body. On earth, Chaos Tide's countenance froze. He threw a glance toward Four Worlds Desire and said, "I don't remember him having regenerative abilities." The green light on Four Worlds Desire's body flashed, turning into a faint green color. He seemed to be enjoying Chaos Tide's surprise. He smiled and said, "I've told you before that these 3 guys have been modified by me. They're much more powerful than you can imagine. Your seed is going to lose." Lose? I've said it before. It was just a warm-up earlier. Chaos Tide spread out his 5 fingers, and a green light net stretched out from his palm. It encompassed toward the sky in an instant, and within a short few seconds, the entire Earth sky had turned green. Countless people looked at the changes in the sky in disbelief, unable to imagine what had happened. Seeing the changes in the sky, Yi Feng, William, and the others also quickly rushed toward Four Worlds Desire and Chaos Tide. They had a vague feeling that the changes in this world were related to them. However, they did not have the chance to do so. After the green light cocoon encompassed the entire Earth, Chaos Tide grabbed out with his 5 fingers, and Earth rapidly shrank like a marble. In the end, Chaos Tide grabbed it into his palm. From the beginning to the end, Four Worlds Desire only watched as Chaos Tide kept Earth away. He said sarcastically, "Even if you're angry, you don't have to destroy my planet, right? I only want that idiot to fight with all his might. He doesn't know how strong the 3 of them are. That's why he has the idea of slowly increasing his power and controlling the battlefield. I thought that it wouldn't be long before I'd be able to defeat the 3 warriors you sent. But it seems that it won't be possible." While Chaos Tide and Four Worlds Desire were talking, a message was transmitted into Lianping's ears. It was Chaos Tide's voice. "Kid, I've already protected this Earth. The 3 of them are much stronger than you think. Go all out. There's no need to give me face. It'll be fine even if you tear down this solar system." Lianping, who was surrounded by cold air and flames, suddenly opened his eyes, and a stream of light burst out. 8 months ago, Lianping already possessed the Light Speed Fist and the Quantum Vacuum Fist. He had the power to destroy Earth with a single strike. Then now, 8 months later, Lianping's power had reached 4.3 billion times that of before. How far could his true power go? Lianping put out both of his hands. On his right hand, an extremely pitch-black substance that was hard to describe with the naked eye, hard to observe, and even hard to describe with words was born from nothingness. The moment it appeared, the surrounding space was distorted, and it was hard for light to circulate. Even the right half of Lianping's body gradually disappeared. It was the ultimate existence in the universe, a black hole. Concurrently, a huge ball of light appeared on Lianping's left hand. It was brighter than the sun and hotter than the inner part of a star. It was a superstar that had never been seen before. There was darkness on his right hand and light on his left. At the next moment, Lianping's hands pressed toward his chest. "Stop him." The man in the cape was the first to understand what it was. While communicating with the other 2 through brainwaves, he had already turned into a stream of light and shadow, smashing fiercely toward Lianping. Compared to the man in the cape, the other 2 were much slower. They were unable to stop Lianping in time. It was because even with the man in the cape's speed, by the time he dashed up to Lianping, the light and darkness in his hands had already overlapped. The darkness engulfed the light completely at a speed that could be seen by the naked eye. "It's too late." Just as this thought flashed through his mind, the man in the cape was engulfed by countless light rays at the next moment. The light and darkness explosion that Lianping had caused with his palms pressed together was based on the principle of using an artificial black hole to engulf an artificial star. The 2 poles of the star released streams of blue flames, and the terrifying energy was mixed with invisible and colorless gamma rays. With Li Anping's body as the center, they shot out in all directions. The result of the light and darkness explosion was the most violent explosion in the universe, a gamma-ray burst. The Sun could consume about 4 million tons of hydrogen per second, and the energy released per second was equivalent to 910 million-ton hydrogen bombs. Right now, the gamma-ray burst that was produced between Li Anping's palms produced energy that was equivalent to the energy released by millions or tens of millions of suns every second. When the gamma-ray burst lasted for more than 1 minute, the energy released was equivalent to the total amount of sunlight released over 1 trillion years. Following the violent eruption of the gamma rays, the explosion between Li Anping's palms stopped for an entire minute. However, in this short 1 minute, the end of the entire solar system was destined. In just over 20 hours, the solar system would be completely enveloped by the gamma-ray burst. Be it planets or stars, everything would disappear in the face of this violent power. No stable molecular structure would be able to exist in such an environment. The entire solar system would disintegrate into countless particles, like a beautiful firework, quietly floating in the universe. The gamma rays would not stop that easily. With the solar system as the center, they would advance toward the Sirius star, the Old Man star, and the Vega star. However, as the distance increased, its prowess would gradually weaken, and there would no longer be such a terrifying scene of destroying the entire solar system. At Earth's original position, the green light on Four Worlds Wish's body trembled a few times like water ripples. It seemed to be very surprised by Li Anping's move. This Li Anping is really amazing. I'm looking forward to the results of his modification and modulation. Chaos Tide frowned and looked toward the space that was filled with high temperatures, strong magnetic fields, and explosions. He said unhappily, "You've really created 3 monsters." Chapter 445. The previous battle between Li Anping and the other 3 could only be said to be a warm-up and a test, as both parties did not have a good understanding of each other's abilities and were wary of Earth. However, after the tides of chaos took away Earth, and Li Anping used the gamma-ray burst to vaporize the entire solar system, the other 3 people also released all of their powers under the command of the Four World. In the cosmic space that was filled with high temperatures, particle flows and explosions, a massive figure appeared at a location 120,000 kilometers away from Li Anping. It was the monkey, who had been struck by Li Anping's gamma-ray burst, bombarded, and disintegrated countless times. However, under the command of the Four Worlds, the monkey, who had released all of the powers in his body, was now completely different from before. Right now, the monkey's body had swelled up to a height of over 20 meters, and the muscles all over his body swelled up fiercely. What was even more special was that both his physical body and his hair had turned completely green. Right now, not only were the gamma-ray bursts in the surroundings unable to hurt him, but they were also continuously absorbed by his body, causing him to become increasingly greener and bigger. The armor he was wearing had long been torn into pieces during the transformation process. Right now, the monkey looked like an enlarged version of a wild green-furred monkey. His sharp canine teeth and savage expression made him seem like an invincible ferocious beast. The even more astonishing thing was that Li Anping sensed that as the monkey's brain waves fluctuated intensely, the energy in his body was also increasing crazily. The more furious? The more powerful? When Li Anping thought of this, the green monkey clenched his fists and tore through the space before him. He took a step forward and appeared 100 meters away from Li Anping. However, the moment he appeared, his massive body was already encompassed by countless white flames. It was the radiant glass flames. However, there were no changes to the monkey's body when the flames burned him. It could be said that as the time dimension shifted, there were almost no changes to the monkey's battle prowess. On the other hand, Li Anping, who was using the radiant glass flames, had depleted more energy. His lifespan is too long. The decrease in his battle prowess from the time shift isn't as much as the energy I deplete. Ah! It hurts so much. At the same time, the green monkey, whose entire body was enveloped by the brilliant glass fire, roared madly. His anger was like a tsunami, drowning his reason. His eyes rolled back, and the only thought in his mind was to vent. He wanted to vent the anger in his heart and smash everything in front of him. The only humanoid creature in front of him, Li Anping, was his best target. A huge swastika appeared behind his back, and a surge of energy surged out from the green monkey's palms. Even though his rationality was drowned out by his rage, the four realms' desire that had been engraved on his instincts still activated naturally. Fueled by his endless rage and power, every single muscle, bone, and flesh of his was crazily swallowing the gamma rays around him. A power that could dominate the modern world slowly rose from his body. The green monkey's 5 fingers were like hooks, flicking continuously, forming the infinity seal. With the surging power and the will to dominate the world, he fiercely attacked Li Anping. The power of this attack was so ferocious that it was as if 10,000 stars had exploded. It directly blasted apart the spatial dimension between Li Anping and himself, and then, without any fancy moves, it exploded on the surface of Li Anping's body. This attack was just the beginning. The green monkey seemed to have gone mad. He didn't care about Li Anping in front of him, nor did he care about the effect of the attack just now. He had already launched another frenzied attack. He only wanted to burn his own body, burn his own power, and then destroy everything in front of him, leaving nothing behind. His 2 huge green palms changed continuously, like a blooming lotus flower, and formed 10 kinds of palm prints in succession. Root, wisdom, boundless, nirvana, formless, bodhi, mokh, kaidi, polo. The fangs in the green monkey's mouth suddenly increased by 2 feet, and accompanied by a mad roar, he fiercely attacked Li Anping. Tathagata! Tathagata! 10 consecutive palm strikes, bringing with them an overbearing power that could shake the heavens and the earth, landed heavily on the spot where Li Anping was standing. Bam 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 bam! A series of shattering sounds rang out, and the space within a range of 1,000 miles became like a mirror, shattering and distorting into pieces. The entire world turned into a grotesque and variegated space-time. And in this space-time, Li Anping's body kept on jumping between the spaces, and the space-time was restored to its original state through many spatial doors. His body was also slowly regenerating. The power that the green monkey had displayed earlier was so overbearing that in terms of physical strength alone, it had already surpassed his previous state. Using one's physical body to blow up the dimension, this was simply unbelievable to the extreme. However, since this physical body was no longer useful, then he would create an even stronger one. The restraints of every particle in his body were being undone, and his molecular structure was collapsing. His entire body seemed to have turned into a state of chaos, like a bowl of thick soup. Quantum vacuum fist, 100% activated. Li Anping's body lost all of its molecular and electronic structures, as if it had turned into a lump of unstable power, a lump of pure power. Take a punch from me as well. Amidst this state of chaos, Li Anping punched out. With this punch, there was a bit of light that scattered out. It was just a bit of light, but it was heavier than the entire solar system. This was a miniature neutron star that Li Anping had created through void creation. Wherever this punch passed by, it was as if 10,000 horses were mute, and everything returned to silence. Regardless of whether it was space or time, everything was distorted under this absolute power. Using absolute power to push the toughest matter in the universe. Seeing Li Anping's punch, the green monkey laughed maniacally, and a hint of clarity seemed to flash in its eyes that had been engulfed by fury. Good timing! Accompanied by this explosive bellow, the green monkey struck out with both of its palms, and endless green light was released from its green body. Light rays started to move around in arcs around its body, and time seemed to be jumping incessantly. Then one after another, green monkey phantom images appeared behind it. They were like fish that had jumped out from the water, temporarily jumping out from the timeline and arriving in the current universe. The green monkey projected the powers from countless timelines into this universe's spacetime, then brought along several tens of thousands of palm imprints. Each palm imprint kept on changing, and in the end, they brought along the will to dominate the present. They turned into the Emoku seal and smashed out crazily toward Lianping. Tathagata Divine Palm, Myriad Buddha's Greeting, Emoku Seal. I am the Buddha. The myriad Buddhas are the myriad of me. The fists and palms clashed, and Lianping and the green monkey disappeared without a sound. Space was shattered and time was blasted apart. When space-time lost its meaning, a mass of pitch-black darkness was born from nothingness, engulfing Lianping and the green monkey. It then expanded out toward the remains of the entire solar system. On the other side, the cloaked man and the golden-haired man had also completed their transformations. Open, rest, life, wound, do, view, shock, death. A total of 8 points on the cloaked man's body exploded one after another. Within each point there were 800 yellow suns sealed by the thoughts of the foreworld. The 8 gates opened at the same time, and more than 6,400 yellow suns exploded within the cloaked man's body. To the other 3 people, the amount of energy released from the yellow sun's explosion could only be considered average. However, to the cloaked man, this amount of energy was enough to allow him to possess powers that were comparable to those of the divine demon level. A golden light flashed, and the cloaked man flew into the space-time tunnel that had exploded. He chased after the green monkey and Lianping, who had disappeared. To be continued. If you like this work, you're welcome to cast your recommendation votes or monthly votes. Your support is my greatest motivation. Mobile users, please read the article at M. Chapter 446. Parallel Earth, Fuyuki City. In a magnificent hall, a man with blonde hair and crimson eyes, who was wearing golden armor, looked at the female knight who was panting heavily and said, "Saber, you're too slow. Even if you're just playing with a familiar rabid dog, it's rude of you to make me wait for so long." The blonde female knight looked at the man before her with a solemn expression. "Archer, what's with that expression of yours? You're just like a hungry and skinny dog." The man with blonde hair and crimson eyes smiled and said, "Saber, even if you fall into delusion and kneel on the ground, you're still a very beautiful woman. Give up on your sword and become my wife. Why are you clinging on to that nonsensical holy grail that can bring about miracles? Give up on those boring ideals and vows. In the future, you just have to pursue to be dyed in my color. When the time comes, under the title of the King of all things, I'll bestow upon you all the happiness and delight in this world." As the man with blonde hair and crimson eyes spoke, weapons would occasionally shoot out from the void behind him, piercing into the blonde female knight's body. Looking at how the female knight was bleeding and kneeling on the ground, the man's gaze became even more joyful. However, just then, a huge black passageway suddenly appeared between the blonde female knight and the man with blonde hair and crimson eyes. It was a gap between time and space. Violent air currents gushed out from it, sweeping through the entire hall like shock waves. This violent air currents even forced the 2 people present to cover their eyes with their hands. Then, with a rumbling sound, a black shadow darted out from the passageway, smashing into the blonde female knight like a meteor. The terrifying power blew on the blonde female knight's body along with strong gales. Even though there was no physical contact, just the indirect contact from the air currents had sent the female knight flying out. After smashing through 2 walls, she fell to the ground. Lianping stood up. When he saw the scene before him, he was a little surprised. To come to a planet with humans in the vast void. This was really a very low probability. Then he looked at the blonde female knight who was coughing up blood and getting up from the ground. He frowned. When the man with blonde hair and crimson eyes saw all of this, a hint of fury flashed on his face. He shouted toward Lianping, ****, do you know whose wedding you're interrupting? A halberd shot out from behind the golden-haired, red-eyed man, aiming for Lianping's chest. However, Lianping was more concerned about the man's words when he heard the so-called attack. Unlike the last time, this time, Lianping could not understand the language of the other party. This time, he could understand the other party's language. This was because on Earth, where the Crimson Alliance was located, there was a country called Japan that had always used this language to communicate. Did I jump through timelines and arrive in a parallel universe? Lianping knew that with the strength of the four of them, although they could use brute force to blast open spacetime, this method of traveling through spacetime was uncontrollable. At most, they could only jump between different timelines in the same universe. It was impossible to go to another universe. Just then, the longsword that the other party shot out struck Lianping's chest accurately. However, other than a clang and the halberd shattering under the force field's rebounding force, nothing else happened. ****. Seeing that nothing happened to Fang Xinjian after he shot out his treasure artifact, and that it was his own treasure artifact that had shattered, the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man became even more furious. With a raise of his hand, countless sabers, spears, staffs, and all sorts of cold weapons appeared behind him. "How dare you use your filthy body to destroy my treasure artifact? Are you prepared to die?" ****. Lianping ignored him and merely looked toward the black passageway that was trembling once again. He said, "If I were you, I'd quickly get out of the way." Get out of the way? Just as the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man did not understand what Fang Xinjian meant, another huge green figure darted out from the passageway. With a loud boom, the green monkey looked a lot more miserable than Lianping. His green body, which was originally several tens of meters tall, had now shrunk to less than 5 meters tall. There were wounds all over his body that kept on compressing and healing themselves. It was obvious that he was at a disadvantage in the earlier exchange of palm and fist. However, this also freed him from his rage. He looked at Lianping and said, "Lad, you're the 5th person I've met who can take this attack of mine head-on. Tell me your name." While the monkey was speaking, the entire building in the hall kept on shaking. It looked like it was going to collapse at any moment due to the impact from the monkey. When Lianping heard the green monkey's words, he replied coldly, "Lianping." He then pointed at the green monkey's feet and said, "If you use a little more strength, you'll trample him to death." The green monkey raised his right foot and looked at the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man who had sunk into the ground under his foot. "You ****, you're being disrespectful to me." With a boom, the green monkey stomped down again. To him, it was just putting his foot back. However, to the man under his foot, this huge foot and terrifying power was a super-strong attack that could cause serious injuries. The man's words were stuffed back into his mouth. The corners of the green monkey's lips curled up into a savage smile. He put his palms together and said, "Let's fight again." His green fur and muscles trembled intensely, and waves of domineering intent soared into the sky from his body once again. However, a stream of golden light flashed, and the cloaked man, who was emitting streams of light, appeared from the black space-time passageway. He pressed down on the green monkey's shoulder and said, "Stop it. If you fight here, do you want to destroy the people on this entire planet?" The green monkey was about to rebut him and continue to attack when the four worlds' ideology's intent was transmitted into his mind. "Don't be rash. We'll fight again in another place." This universe had been occupied by the four worlds' ideology to begin with. Regardless of which timeline it was in, Earth was his important warehouse. How could he possibly allow his subordinates to destroy it? Thankfully, Lianping was not someone who would willfully destroy things. He did not attack the moment he came out from the spacetime passageway. Otherwise, this planet would definitely be destroyed. Seeing that the monkey was no longer attacking, the cloaked man patted his shoulder and said, "Also, release the commoners under your feet. They're all innocent, ordinary people." Troublesome. The monkey raised his thick calf and reached out his thumb and index finger, which were as thick as an ordinary person's head. He grabbed the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man's head and lifted him up. "You be **starred." The golden-haired, crimson-eyed man, who was lifted up by the monkey like a little chick, seemed to be seriously injured. His body was covered in wounds and bruises, and blood kept flowing out from the corners of his mouth. "Kneel down." The fury on his face had broken through the horizon. His face was bright red, as if his blood vessels were going to burst at any moment. As he bellowed furiously, hundreds of treasures appeared from the surrounding void space, shooting toward the monkey's body like raindrops. The monkey looked at the rain of swords in disdain. He opened his mouth and let out a low bellow. An air current was released from his throat, and the sound waves that could be seen by the naked eye blew away the rain of swords that were descending from the sky. They also crushed the treasures into dust mercilessly. Accompanied by the rumbling sounds of explosions, this breath was like igniting a fuel-air explosive. Streams of smoke and dust soared into the sky, and the buildings in the hall collapsed from the explosion. After the explosion, only the golden-haired swordswoman, who had been sent flying by Lianping earlier, got up from the ruins with great effort. She looked in the direction of Lianping and the others, and her eyes were filled with astonishment. She saw the green-haired monkey grabbing the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man's head. It was as if he was swinging trash, and the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man's body was slammed onto the ground. Along with the continuous slamming, fresh blood and pieces of flesh were splattering everywhere. The man had completely fainted. However, under the watchful eyes of Lianping and the man in the cape, he did not have the nerve to kill the man. Instead, he simply smashed him for fun. Seeing that the man had fainted, he threw him into the ruins like he was throwing trash. At the same time, other than the two humans and the monkey who had just appeared, a golden-haired man had also arrived at the center of the hall. Suddenly, the golden-haired swordswoman looked at the sky. Along with the opening of a big black hole, black mud that looked like magma fell from the sky. "It's the Holy Grail." She suddenly recalled that the Holy Grail must have been damaged by the explosion earlier. Seeing that the black mud was about to fall from the sky, the four of them, including Lianping, raised their heads and looked at it. The man in the cape and Lianping looked at the black mud that was falling from the sky. They could feel the high temperature and danger from it. If the black mud were to fall from the sky, they would be fine, but the people here would be severely injured or killed. The two of them frowned at the same time and each raised their hands to send out a punch. The two of them had carefully controlled their powers. However, even so, the shock waves caused by the two punches still sent all the black mud flying back. The mud even rushed into the black hole, causing a series of explosions. Even the hole in the sky disappeared abruptly from the two punches. It was as if the wrinkled space had been smoothed out by a single hand. The entire sky returned to its original state once again. Lianping and the man in the cape exchanged a glance. It was as if they had not expected that the other party would take the initiative to stop the disaster from happening. Just then, a green teleportation door opened up next to them. The voice of the Four Worlds Wish rang out, "All right, since everyone is here, let's change the venue. Next time, it shouldn't be so coincidental that we'll come to a human planet." Hearing that, the four of them darted into the spatial door one after another, leaving behind the golden-haired swordswoman who looked at the ruins in a daze, as well as the golden-haired, crimson-eyed man who had been smashed into a tattered sack. In the solar system that was gradually engulfed by endless darkness. As a stream of green light and a stream of green light flashed, the darkness slowly retreated. The Four Worlds Wish and Chaos Tide continued to stand quietly where Earth had been. Before them were still the light images of Lianping and the other three. It was as if nothing could change the things around them. They watched as Li Anping and the other three walked into the teleportation door one after another. The Four Worlds Wish mumbled, "Amazing. Chaos Tide, you're really generous." Using 3 of the top warriors in the multivariate universe as whetstones and using the entire universe as a training ground. This is your goal? Chaos Tide seemed to have a despicable smile on his face that made people want to give him a few punches. Hearing the Four Worlds Wish's words, he was even more unconcerned. He merely shrugged and said, "Who knows?" The Four Worlds Wish let out a cold snort and continued, "No matter what your thoughts are, it's impossible for Li Anping to win against the 3 of them. Regardless of whether it's in terms of power or knowledge, the difference between the 2 of them is too great. Aren't you afraid that the whetstones will break your sword?" Chaos Tide shrugged and smiled despicably. "Who knows?" Chapter 447. First, it was endless darkness, followed by colorful light rays. When Li Anping walked out of the teleportation gate, what appeared before him was an extremely vast plain. The entire plain was formed from some kind of crystal structure. No, it should be said that the entire planet was formed from a crystal structure. The temperature was around -100 degrees Celsius, and there were no signs of life or organic matter. At the same time as Li Anping completed his probing, a huge palm that was covered in green fur came down from the sky, slapping out fiercely toward his body. Looking from several 100,000 kilometers away, one could see that the entire crystal planet had started to cave in, then it started to break apart. All sorts of lava and rocks spewed out, shooting out into outer space at a speed of over 100 kilometers per second like many cannonballs. Then the planet started to disintegrate, turning into countless meteors of various sizes that shot out into the surrounding space. At the next moment, the cloaked man arrived as well. As a stream of golden light flashed, an overwhelming fist force pierced through Li Anping's body and extended out toward the endless void space. This terrifying force caused countless spatial rifts along the way. As it kept on traversing through space, the seething fist force shot out toward this star system's fixed star. Therefore, the hydrogen and helium in the fixed star's body were rapidly depleted, and its lifespan of several million years seemed to have been enhanced with time acceleration. As the fixed star underwent tremendous changes and extinguished, the entire star system would be drawn into the gravitational tides, turning into a pile of wreckage. The cloaked man, who was the instigator, once again brought about a stream of golden light and chased after Li Anping and the green monkey. Then the golden-haired man from before also walked out from the teleportation gate. He put out a finger and pressed it against his forehead, instantly moving to the cloaked man's side. In reality, the 4 of them did not have the ability to jump through timelines as they wished. However, they were able to rely on their great powers to explode the space-time dimensions, completing actions that were similar to space-time transference, jumping from one timeline to another. Such jumping actions were uncontrollable and could not be calculated. They might even lose the possibility of returning to their original timeline. However, at this point in the battle, the 4 of them were no longer interested in considering the possibility of such things happening. What they needed to consider was to give it their all and get rid of their opponent. In fact, if it wasn't for the fact that they had just arrived on a human planet, they wouldn't have stopped at all. They would have just kept on fighting, even if they kept on tearing apart spacetime and fighting in the long river of time and space until the end. In the endless void, the green monkey's body continued to grow as it fought and grew in rage. In the blink of an eye, it broke through a height of more than 30 meters. It put its palms together like a treasure vase, and the surrounding space seemed to be frozen in an instant. As the green monkey moved, bursts of Sanskrit chants and the fragrance of flowers descended from the unknown universe. Gamma rays burst out from the eyes of the monkey, extending out into the surrounding starry space, killing all the living beings that passed by. Take my Dharma boundless. The ninth style of Buddha's palm, the boundless Dharma. How could Li Anping possibly take on such a powerful attack head-on? His body gradually turned into light as he dodged to the side. However, the cloaked man beside him naturally wouldn't let him leave so easily. His hands brought about streaks of lightning, enveloping the half-light power like a tempest. Plasma Light Speed Fist. The so-called Light Speed Fist was something that couldn't be seen or detected. It was because it represented the fastest speed in the universe. No matter what method of detection was used, it would all be through light and rays. But what kind of waves or rays would be faster than light? Therefore, regardless of whether it was Li Anping or the cloaked man, neither of them were able to see the other's attacks clearly. Their fists were all bombarding each other, and there was no such thing as dodging or blocking. The only thing they could do was to take on the attacks head-on. This was because by the time you sensed the other party's attack, the light speed fist would have already struck your body. Over 100 million light speed fists formed a net of light that enveloped Li Anping completely. The explosive energy blasted him out of the light state. However, how could the cloaked man's plasma light speed fist be so simple after being amplified by the yellow sun's 8 inner hidden gates? The 100 million light speed fists were just the beginning. Even more light speed fists enveloped Li Anping completely, trapping Li Anping like a huge cocoon of light. This almost materialized effect was something that Li Anping's light speed fist was unable to achieve. It was because his light speed fist turned his fists into light, while his opponent's light speed fist relied on tyrannical powers to distort space and time. Just as Li Anping was temporarily trapped by the plasma light speed fist, the green monkey's Tathagata divine palm had already descended. A power that could dominate the present world descended from the sky, turning into two huge palms that slapped out fiercely toward the cocoon of light that Li Anping was in from the left and right. The tremendous power encompassed an area of several thousand kilometers. Then, as if swatting a fly, all matter between the palms was slapped into a flat surface. That's right, a flat surface. When the palm power dissipated, all matter, including Li Anping, was slapped into a two-dimensional state by the palms. Right now, Li Anping had turned into countless two-dimensional existences. Just like his heart, it had been divided into countless pieces, and each piece was in a two-dimensional plane. From the front, each plane looked like a plane that had been cut out with a knife. However, from the side they completely disappeared. It was because there was no thickness to two-dimensional existences. When one looked at them from the side, they would disappear. It was like projecting a three-dimensional image into a two-dimensional image. Any two-dimensional creature would only be able to see a part of a three-dimensional creature. Now that Li Anping had turned into a two-dimensional image, his entire body had turned into countless two-dimensional projections. This was a dimensional reduction attack. The boundless Buddhist Dharma was to beat someone into a two-dimensional image without any boundaries. In the process of dimensional reduction, most creatures would instantly collapse due to the disintegration of their physical bodies. However, both the green monkey and the cloaked man knew that Li Anping would not die so easily. Therefore, when the green monkey performed the boundless Buddhist Dharma and contracted his body rapidly like a deflated balloon, shrinking back to a height of 5 meters, the cloaked man had already made his move. Faced with Li Anping, who had turned into a two-dimensional creature, the cloaked man once again raised his fists that were moving at light speed. However, this time around, when the two fists moved forward at light speed, one of them smashed out fiercely toward the left and the other toward the right. He looked like a human-shaped cross. The fists were moving at light speed, and each particle in the fists maintained the same direction and speed. Other than the light speed from the left and right, there was no other speed. In this situation, when the two fists pulled at the left and right sides of his body, the speed of light slowly extended from the two fists to his entire body. All the particles on the left side of his body moved to the left at light speed, while all the particles on the right side of his body moved to the right at light speed. When the left and right light speed movements combined in the middle of his body, the cloaked man's body was not torn apart through an ingenious method of force transfer and powerful energy. Instead, the vectors on the left and right sides were cancelled out, and the speed of all the particles on his body instantly became zero. All the particles stopped moving, and an aura that could end the universe and cause all living things to wither emerged from the cloaked man's body. The forgiveness of the Son of Dawn. On the human-shaped cross, an icy aura that represented absolute zero spread out rapidly. Regardless of whether it was molecules, atoms, electrons, quarks, or the ubiquitous dark matter, space, or time, everything disappeared in this absolute zero. Even photons were stopped, causing the surroundings to become pure darkness. Seeing that the forgiveness of the Son of Dawn had hit the two-dimensional Lianping, the cloaked man quickly ended this state and retreated, so that he would not be affected by this absolute zero. Is he dead? The green monkey looked at the pitch-black darkness warily. In the domain of absolute zero, even he was unable to detect the situation inside. It was because any rays or waves that entered this domain would become absolutely still, as if they had disappeared. It was hard for him to imagine whether Fang Xinjian was dead or alive after being hit by the dimensional reduction attack and absolute zero. The golden-haired man, who had not made a move since arriving at this timeline, only watched coldly. The excitement in his eyes grew increasingly strong. It was as if the stronger Lianping was, the happier he would be. The cloaked man was the first to react. He shouted, "Be careful, he's still alive." In the void of the universe's vacuum, the circulatory system, the movement system, the digestive system, and the various systems of the human body suddenly appeared before them. It was as if a naughty child was drawing on a canvas. He's reorganizing his body. Stop him. If it was said that humans were a superposition of infinite possibilities, a wave of probabilities, then Lianping's existence contained infinite possibilities. Most of the particles in a human's body gathered together to form a human body. However, there were still many particles that floated outside the body. According to quantum theory, these particles outside the body could exist in all sorts of possible spaces. Right now, Lianping's human body had been wiped out. However, this was only the highest probability of being wiped out. Under such circumstances, the consciousness algorithm's backup rebirth program was activated. He started to be reborn from the low probabilities in the surrounding void, turning the low probabilities into high probabilities. This change in probabilities was like 0. 25 plus 0. 25 plus 0. 5 is equal to 1. Now that's 0. 5 was wiped out, the other two 0. 25s started to increase until they could form another one. Of course, this was just a metaphor. The reality was more complicated. Countless human body parts were born from void space. The cloaked man and the green monkey went all out and started to wipe out these low probabilities of being reborn. This time, the cloaked man turned his fist into a hand blade and started to vibrate at the speed of light. Before this hand blade that was vibrating at the speed of light, all of Lianping's reborn bodies were sliced into pieces. Capricorn's sacred sword, Excalibur. Before this hand blade that was vibrating at the speed of light, there was nothing that it could not cut through. The cloaked man's hands moved at high speed, destroying the enemies before him at a speed of over 10,000 per second. On the other side, the green monkey did not hold back either. The fur all over its body shook rapidly, and countless clones descended from the sky. However, the clones this time were different from the ones in the past. They did not have the appearance of monkeys. Instead, they were many green giants. These giants stepped on clouds and moved about in void space, tearing all of Lianping's body parts into pieces. At this moment, the intensity of their attacks did not matter. They were using the fastest, simplest, and most effective method to destroy Lianping's lymph nodes, blood vessels, bones, and other body parts that kept appearing in void space. However, it was useless. As they killed, they only changed the probability distribution in void space. As more of the reborn body parts were destroyed, the probability of the remaining parts that were not destroyed increased, and the speed at which they were reborn also increased. When the cloaked man and the green monkey destroyed the last body, the probability of this body also became 100%. Lianping descended once again. The 100% state could only be maintained for an instant. After that, the probabilities started to rearrange themselves and spread out in all directions once again. A tremendous amount of data flowed in Lianping's eyes. He looked at the cloaked man who was the first to charge over and used his hand blade that was vibrating at the speed of light, Excalibur. Lianping revealed a mysterious smile. The earlier experience has allowed me to think of a way to deal with you. He also extended his hand blade. Naturally, it was not a hand blade that was vibrating at the speed of light. Lianping was unable to move at the speed of light without transforming into light. This time around, his right arm had completely turned into a two-dimensional state, a state where its thickness was 0. Take this, two-dimensional hand blade. Chapter 448. This was a slash without any thickness. As for the cloaked man's body, no matter how strong his defense was, how high his density was, how thick his skin was, and how tight it was, the microscopic structure would always be made up of particles. As long as he was still material, there would be gaps. As long as there were gaps, the two-dimensional plane with no thickness would slash into these gaps. The gaps between the two bodies were filled up by the two-dimensional hand blade. The electromagnetic forces, strong forces, weak forces, and gravitational forces between the particles were all blocked off. The light-speed vibration hand blade used the elbow as the boundary. It instantly broke, and the entire arm flew out at light speed, disappearing. The two-dimensional hand blade did not rely on three-dimensional means, such as strength or sharpness, to cut through. It was because of this that there was nothing in the world that it could not cut through. It cut through the molecules, atoms, electrons, and even smaller microscopic levels. With this slash, the caped man's arm was cut off, and a huge wound was slashed out on his chest. He retreated rapidly, looking at Lianping in disbelief. This was the first time he had been injured while using the Yellow Sun's energy. Lianping looked at the wound on his body that was slowly healing and thought, so he really has regenerative abilities as well? However, his body's toughness is too high. The energy required for regeneration is several 10,000 times that of the other two. However, before the two-dimensional hand blade, his body's toughness is meaningless. Such a high-toughness body instead becomes a burden that consumes energy. While thinking about this, Lianping had already given chase, slashing out toward the caped man's head once again. However, this time around, both the caped man and the green monkey were prepared. They did not use their bodies to take the attack head-on. Instead, they used long-range attacks to deal with Lianping. However, regardless of whether it was energy-type attacks or force-field-type attacks, they were all slashed into two by Lianping's two-dimensional hand blade. There was nothing that it could not slash through. Be it dimensional reduction or absolute zero, no matter what kind of attacks they were, as long as they were still powered by the four great forces, electromagnetic forces, strong forces, weak forces, and gravitational forces, they were produced through the exchange of particles. They would not be able to escape from the gravitons, gluons, photons, and bosons. They would be slashed into two by Lianping. Just as the two of them were at a disadvantage against Lianping, the golden-haired man, who had not made a move all this while, finally moved. The golden-haired man raised both of his hands, and a flame shot out from his palms. The golden-haired man did not have the cloaked man's strength and speed. Without his body's toughness, he was unable to use the light-speed fist. He didn't have a strong regenerative ability like the green monkey. His physical strength was only a few 100,000 tons, so he couldn't use techniques like reducing and increasing dimensions. The only thing he had was energy and chi. It was boundless, enough to split the heavens and earth, enough to fill the entire universe. Compared to Li Anping, the Caped Man, and the Green Monkey combined, he had a lot more chi and energy. When this energy was converted into energy at an unprecedented rate, a terrifying attack was born. The inexhaustible chi in his body quickly turned into an endless stream of flames. Then, like a supernova explosion, it swept toward Li Anping and the other two. Heaven-shaking earth-burning flame. This move, which originally required the absorption of the world's powers, was completed by the golden-haired man's endless chi. It was because compared to the so-called powers of the world, the chi contained in the golden-haired man's body was countless times stronger, be it in terms of quality or quantity. The so-called heaven and earth could not even withstand a single blow from him. It also allowed him to release a unit of killing prowess that was over 1,000,000 times stronger than before. Boom! A temperature of over 1 billion degrees Celsius erupted. Accompanied by all sorts of X-rays, gamma rays, infrared rays, and high-temperature gases, they covered the entire star system at the speed of light. They also surrounded where Li Anping and the other two were. Under such high temperatures, other than the Caped Man, no one else, be it Li Anping or the Green Monkey, could easily maintain their bodies. Li Anping quickly stopped the movement of the molecules in the surroundings, maintaining the temperature at around 1,000 degrees Celsius. Faced with these endless flames, even the two-handed chop was useless. The Green Monkey cried out in agony as he kept on being burned and regenerated. However, this pain did not weaken his battle prowess. Instead, it turned into fury, greatly increasing his power. However, this was only the beginning. Following the supernova explosion created by the golden-haired man, the energy released by the intense gamma rays every minute was equivalent to the total amount of radiation in the entire Milky Way over the past 200 years. A misty relic similar to a nebula would be created here. The terrifying light would illuminate the universe 12.9 billion light-years later, reaching the limit of the universe's observational distance. It would continue until 20 billion years later, when the entire universe would come to an end. However, such a move that relied purely on energy to crush the opponent was still unable to kill Li Anping, the Green Monkey, and the Caped Man. The Green Monkey bellowed furiously, "Are you crazy?" Amidst the endless burning, his body was filled with fury. The gamma rays created by the supernova explosion kept on drilling into his body, causing his green shell to grow larger and larger. "Stop!" The Caped Man stopped him. "If you continue to use such a move, it'll cause too much damage." The golden-haired man merely smiled at their dissuasion. This was a battlefield that the Green Monkey had specially chosen. The nearest life planet was several million light-years away. It would be several million years before the subsequent explosion would affect those planets. Who knew if those planets would still be around by then, and if there would still be people on them? Moreover, compared to those fragile lives, the golden-haired man was more concerned about the enemy before him. He was more concerned about whether Li Anping would be able to take on his subsequent attack. Heaven and earth trembled. Mountain trembled, ghost and god terrified after the supernova explosion, while everything was turned into a pot of thick chemical soup. It also gave birth to the most powerful celestial weapon in the universe, the neutron star. With the golden-haired man's endless energy as the driving force, the intensity of this supernova explosion far surpassed that of any other explosion in the history of the universe. After the golden-haired man activated Demon and God's terror, this move's ability to control gravity was unleashed to the extreme. Then, with the remaining prowess of the supernova explosion, it gave birth to a fixed star, a white dwarf, a pulsed neutron star, a magnetic star, and a quark star. How could the prowess of these prowess be compared to the original 5 sacred mountains in this move? These 5 celestial bodies came crashing toward Lianping and the other 2 at sublight speed from 5 different directions. Of course, at such a speed, it was impossible for them to really hit Lianping, the green monkey, or the caped man, who were dodging at full speed. However, the golden-haired man's goal was not to hit them. His goal was to let the 5 celestial bodies collide together and give birth to an unprecedented black hole. Its prowess was hard to estimate, and it far surpassed the space-time tunnel that Lianping and the green monkey had created earlier. Chapter 449. Looking at the pitch-black image in front of him, Chaos Tide's countenance turned increasingly unpleasant. He suppressed his anger and said, "What kind of mess have you made? Isn't the original good? Why are you making a knockoff?" Light swirled on the green light sphere, forming an image of a middle finger. 4 Worlds Thought said, "Don't you think that my knockoff is better than the original? Moreover, the great sage equaling heaven is XX, Superman is XX, and Scions are XX. It sounds very good. Idiot." Chaos Tide cursed in a low voice. Suddenly, his countenance changed. "This is bad. We've been discovered. Quickly stop him." The 3 top-notch warriors in the multivariate universe might not have broken through to the 9th energy level and reached the realm of demonic gods, but the battle prowess they possessed was already sufficient to go up against the current Lianping. After the golden-haired man used ghosts and gods' panic, time and space were stirred up by a huge gravitational force and mass. The battlefield of the 4 of them jumped out of this timeline and arrived in an endless space and time. The man in the cape was running at a speed that surpassed the speed of light. His speed was so fast that time lost its color on his body. This speed allowed him to head to any point in time on any timeline and continue to swim in the long river of the world. The green monkey was attacking. His hands and feet were attacking crazily. With each punch and kick, there would be even more afterimages moving behind him. He was communicating with each other at different points in time on different timelines, fighting against Lianping. The golden-haired man was exploding. The energy in his body was surging crazily, creating explosions incessantly. It was like a singularity explosion creating the universe. From the source of everything, he attacked everything that happened after in the universe, creating a new universe on top of the previous one. Every second of explosion could attack the universe's space-time that was over 10 billion years in the future. The battle between the 4 of them was getting increasingly intense. The man in the cape, who was running at high speed on the timeline, existed in all the millions of universe years at the same time. His fist had collided with Lianping's fist 100,000 years ago, causing a nuclear explosion. His newly formed fist had been slashed off by Lianping's 2-dimensional hand blade 150,000 years ago, creating a meteor that was moving at close to the speed of light and destroying an entire civilization. The green monkey's body had been sliced into pieces by Lianping 20,000 light-years away. The meteor shower he had created would be observed by Earthlings 20,000 years later, becoming a beautiful astronomical scene. Several tens of thousands of monkey palms had struck Lianping's back 10,000 years later, causing all of the green monkeys that had been borrowed power to be pierced through by Lianping's palms in every battle several tens of thousands of years ago. The blond man's explosion was still ongoing, but because of Lianping's attacks, the parameters and effects of the explosion were changing every minute and every second, which led to the bifurcation of countless future worlds, as well as the birth and death of countless parallel worlds. If one were to compare their battle, the timeline would be like a tree branch. Every inch of the branch would represent a point in time, and they would be like a few snakes coiled around the branch. The battle between the snakes spanned across every inch of the branch, and they would not bear the burden of cause and effect due to the front and back of the branch. They were like a snake crawling on the infinitely long timeline, fighting at every point in time. The front and back of time had no meaning to them, and the cause and effect of their existence would not be affected by the flow of time. However, the effects they created in space-time continued to spread along with the flow of time. Their battle had expanded to infinite space and time. In the first year of Jinkong, 1129, on the day of the peace talks between the Song and the Jin, an inexplicable explosion occurred in the grasslands to the north of China. The entire Jin kingdom's land and the grasslands to the north of the desert were all turned red. No one knew what had happened, and the history of this world had also reached another turning point. This explosion was known as the Jinkong explosion. In 1626 AD, in the southwest corner of Beijing, near the Huanggang factory gunpowder depot, a huge explosion with a radius of 750 meters, an area of 2.25 square kilometers, and more than 20,000 people were killed or injured. This time, the cause was also unknown, and the phenomenon was strange. The huge explosion of the disaster was known as the Tianqi explosion. In 1908, in the Evenki Autonomous Region of Siberia, Russia, 800 kilometers northwest of Lake Baikal, a terrifying explosion equivalent to 500 atomic bombs or dozens of hydrogen bombs exploded at the same time. More than 60 million trees within 2,150 square kilometers were burned down. Although there were almost no casualties, this unprecedented explosion still shocked the world government and was known as the Tunguska explosion. However, the above explosions that occurred at different times on Earth were only the tip of the iceberg of this multidimensional battle. This was a battle that spanned countless light years and countless years at the same time, and occurred at the same time for the parties involved. It did not mean that they were more than light years in size, nor did it mean that the battle lasted more than 1,000,000 years, but the scope of this battle. It was like a person's finger pointing on a two-dimensional piece of paper, then the two-dimensional projection of the finger was a circle. Now, as Li Anping and the other three who were fighting outside of time and space, when they punched out, in addition to the direction and position of the punch, there was also an indicator of time. In this battle that surpassed time and space, and was unprecedentedly intense, Li Anping's thoughts and consciousness began to sublimate. In front of his eyes, data flowed like a waterfall, and the timeline appeared in front of him like a woven net. With every flick of his finger, he could sense the changes in fate and karma. One world after another appeared in front of him, as if they had jumped out of the universe. Stars, the Milky Way, the galaxy, the universe, everything flashed through his mind, and countless pieces of knowledge flowed in his mind. Until a world suddenly appeared. The change in this timeline was so different, and it was so beautiful and full of temptation. Li Anping's vision turned black, and his entire vision was filled with endless white light. All kinds of blurry people of light began to appear in front of his eyes. It was as if this was a world completely composed of light. Welcome! Congratulations! You're finally here! We've been waiting for you for a long time. Join us! Some were old, some were young, some were passionate, and some were cold. Countless voices were like whispers, exploding in Li Anping's mind with a tone that was filled with temptation. They were so warm and so approachable that Li Anping could not help but want to join them. He grabbed his head and abruptly opened his eyes, letting out a soundless cry. Endless white light extended out from his eyes and mouth, as if something terrifying was trying to break free from his body. There was a power that was so familiar yet so unfamiliar appearing in his body. Countless cries rang out in his heart. Use it, this is a power that belongs to you. We are you and you are us. We are the world, we are the origin, we are the Tao, we are one, we are all things. Join us, join us, join us, join us. Li Anping glanced at the green monkey and then flicked his finger lightly. The green monkey was like a rubber ball, crossing a distance of several 100,000,000 light years and arriving at the other end of the universe. Then, he was stuffed into a neutron star. As the energy expanded, the neutron star kept on changing, bound by a string that was completely tight without any gap. Next, it was the cloaked man's turn. His left and right fists clashed against each other hundreds of millions of times per second. Borrowing the infinite inertia brought about by the speed of light, he blasted out a Milky Way starburst toward Lianping. However, Lianping tapped out with his finger again, and the Milky Way starburst burst like a bubble. Then, the cloaked man's forehead was tapped by Lianping. By the time he reacted, his body had already been pulled back to 15 billion years ago. Before him, the Big Bang had yet to happen, and there was no concept of time or space. His consciousness had returned to chaos. The last one was the golden-haired man. Lianping, whose body was gradually covered by white light, blew a breath toward him, and the golden-haired man's body instantly collapsed. Countless possibilities were stacked at this moment, and every part of him spread out to every space on every timeline in the entire universe. He would exist forever, but it would also mean that he would die forever. The tremendous amount of information wiped out his active consciousness. Within a short 3 seconds, the 3 warriors were all defeated. It was only then that Chaos Tide and the 4 worlds thought rushed to the battlefield. Chaos Tide looked at Lianping, whose countenance was gradually covered by white light, with a grim countenance. White, a stream of green light rested on Chaos Tide's shoulder, and the 4 worlds thought advised, "Don't be rash." It only lasted for 3 seconds, and the white light retreated unwillingly into the depths of Lianping's body. However, Lianping still did not wake up. He was like a floating meteorite, plunging into the depths of the universe. Damn it. Chaos Tide said to the 4 worlds thought, "Why did one of the timelines in your universe get invaded by white?" The 4 worlds thought emitted waves of faint green light and said slowly, "It wasn't me." In the process of him traveling through spacetime, he attracted White's attention. It's like a fish that jumped out of the water and was seen by someone. What should we do now? He seems to have come out of that state? Chaos Tide shook his head and waved his hand, sending out a stream of green light. The green light enveloped Lianping and then dragged him over bit by bit. He then reached out his palm and took out the earth that he had been keeping. Then he tossed Lianping, who was enveloped by green light, into the earth in his palm. "I'm going to bring him to the Chaos Sea and think of a way to turn him back." The last bit of his humanity stopped him from taking that step. Right now, 2 different bifurcated states are intersecting in his body. I have to stop him from being integrated into the white. Light flashed on the 4 worlds thought's body and he said, "It's not very good to take away my planet just like that, right? Why don't you hand him over to me? I guarantee that when I return him to you, he'll have already become the 13th demonic god." Haha, the 13th demonic god? Is it a knockoff demonic king or a voice actor? Chaos Tide mocked. If it wasn't for you casually changing those 3 warriors of yours into a mess, turning the space battle into a space-time battle, how could there be such an outcome? I haven't settled the score with you yet, and you're already asking me for benefits. Chaos Tide looked at the earth in his palm once again and mumbled, "Moreover, this human is no longer someone you can modify. In terms of life essence, there's no absolute difference between him and us 12 demonic gods. If you touch him, be careful that he wakes up and turns you into a specimen. When that happens, you'll be called a main god. How about that?" "Humph." The 4 worlds thought snorted twice and did not say anything else. Chaos Tide no longer paid any heed to the 4 worlds thought. Instead, he turned into a stream of green light and disappeared. Only a tattered universe was left behind, waiting for the 4 worlds thought to repair it. Chapter 450. 7 years later, on Earth. October 3rd. Today, the Divine Emperor Mountain in the west of Tianjing City was bustling with people. The humans who were used to using teleportation or flying to travel, today on the Divine Emperor Mountain, all relied on their feet to ascend step by step to the peak of the Divine Emperor Mountain. This was a rule formed spontaneously from their respect for the Divine Emperor Lianping. A beautiful girl wearing a blue short skirt and a white top was called Zhu Xiaoxue. She was a freshman at the First Royal Academy. Originally, the top 10 ability academies in the Eastern continent, except for Academy City, were all grouped into the 1st to 9th Royal Academy. They recruited different innate ability users. Because they only recruited innate ability users and didn't recruit martial arts or magic ability users, the number of students was smaller than other academies. However, the quality of teaching was also higher. Aside from Academy City, it was the place with the most elites in the entire human race. Today, Zhu Xiaoxue came with her family to celebrate the Divine Emperor's birthday. This was also considered a tradition on Earth. Every year, on the 3rd of October, on Lianping's birthday, there would be a public holiday. On this day, Earthlings from all over the solar system would rush to the peak of the Divine Emperor Mountain to pray in front of the Divine Emperor's statue. Zhu Xiaoxue was panting as she climbed to the top of the mountain. Her cheeks were bright red. At this time, the square at the top of the mountain was filled with people. The white statue of the Divine Emperor stood in the center of the square. Such a tall statue might be a miracle in ancient times, but with the construction of nanites, it would only take a few hours. Looking at the statue in front of her, Zhu Xiaoxue closed her eyes and put her hands together. Her mouth seemed to be chanting something, but no one knew what she was praying for. Tisk! At this time, a voice sounded in Zhu Xiaoxue's ear. It was the voice of a boy. He looked at Zhu Xiaoxue with a look of disdain. When he saw Zhu Xiaoxue turn to look at him, he turned his head away again. The little boy was about 5 or 6 years old. He had black hair and black eyes, and his skin was very fair and tender. However, the arrogant look in his eyes made anyone who saw it feel uncomfortable. "What are you cutting?" Zhu Xiaoxue was also an outgoing and lively girl. When she saw the little boy looking at her with disdain, she asked curiously. The little boy rolled his eyes coolly and said, "Auntie, your thoughts are almost written on your forehead. Don't be so wretched, okay? He already has a wife and children, yet you're still fantasizing about others." Zhu Xiaoxue was stunned and immediately reacted. The kid in front of her was not yet 18 years old, and it was impossible for him to be a police officer or a government worker. He definitely did not have the authority to use the mind-reading ability. Obviously, this kid was a natural and had just read her thoughts. Thinking that the little brat in front of her had overheard all the words of love she had secretly said to the holy statue, Zhu Xiaoxue blushed and said, "How can you be like this, casually eavesdropping on other people's thoughts?" The little boy said in an old-fashioned manner, "College students these days are becoming more and more open-minded." Halfway through his sentence, the little boy suddenly looked around as if he had discovered something. Behind Zhu Xiaoxue, her family members were also calling out to her. She turned and greeted them. When she wanted to teach the little brat a lesson again, she realized that he had already disappeared. She turned and looked around, only to discover that many men in black clothes and black pants had appeared around her. So many ability users. Are they the Imperial Guards? Zhu Xiaoxue felt strange. As a student of the First Royal Academy, although she was not a battle-type ability user, she was still relatively familiar with ability users' psychokinesis and some common ability user departments. As ability users who protected the palace, the Imperial Guards were usually selected to have stronger defensive abilities. They were also ability users who were especially obedient and disciplined. Moreover, they should be stationed in the palace all year round. Just as she was feeling strange, a black-clothed man walked up. With a flash of his palm, a work ID and a photo appeared in front of Zhu Xiaoxue in a 3D projection. It was the Imperial Guard's work ID that he had pulled out through nanoworms. On it were the words "Left Pulse" and a long list of work titles. As for the other photo, It was a photo of the little boy from earlier. Left Pulse pointed at the photo and said, "Hello, may I ask if you met this little boy just now?" Zhu Xiaoxue was stunned. However, when she thought of the other party's identity as an imperial guard, she answered truthfully, "I did." Left Pulse nodded. The next moment, a communication request suddenly rang on Zhu Xiaoxue's personal terminal on the Mystic Net. In order to keep it a secret, the Imperial Guard in front of her wanted to talk to Zhu Xiaoxue through the Mystic Net. Zhu Xiaoxue immediately used her consciousness to agree. Then, they could communicate through the Mystic Net. Just as Zhu Xiaoxue and Left Pulse were talking, a blue electric light flashed above the 500-meter-tall holy statue. The little boy, who had been talking to Zhu Xiaoxue earlier, appeared on the top of the holy statue. With a height of 500 meters and the holy statue's huge size, the people below could not see the boy at the center of the holy statue's head. TSK, they really came. With the artificial intelligence blocked, no one can use all the nanoworms monitoring information. There are so many people here. They will have a long time to find. The little boy said to the person beside him, "Little Hui, get ready to leave. Uncle Zhuo is coming personally. The warp gate can't stop us." Beside the little boy was a little girl with white hair and porcelain skin. The little girl looked to be only 4 or 5 years old. When she heard the little boy's words, she pouted and said with reddened eyes, "Brother, are we really leaving? I miss Mommy." "Little Hui, why are you crying again?" The little boy scratched his head and said with a troubled expression, "How about this? You go back. I'll go alone." "Don't." Hearing that the other party was going to abandon her and leave alone, the little girl immediately grabbed the little boy's hand. She sniffled and said, "I won't cry. Brother, don't abandon me." "All right, crybaby." Seeing the little girl's pitiful appearance, the little boy smiled helplessly. He rubbed her little head and said, "Don't worry, we'll be back soon. At most, we'll be scolded by Mommy." Little Hui was like a cat when the little boy rubbed her head. She showed an expression of enjoyment. Hearing the other party's words, she nodded heavily. "Yes. While they haven't noticed our target yet, hurry up and activate your ability to go to the warp gate," Little Boy said as she carried Little Hui on her back. Xiao Hui, who was lying on the little boy's back, stretched out his hands and drew a graceful gesture in the air, muttering, Habariali, cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha-cha." Xiao Hui's entire process was like a child reciting an incantation while playing a game. However, it was this kind of naughty hand gestures and incantation that produced an effect. With a flash of white light, the two of them had already disappeared. Chapter 451. In Tianjing's underground base, the original portal had already been sealed. Anna stood in place with an anxious expression. Zhuomai comforted her. "Don't worry. Lord Bai Xinghe has already received the news. He will find them." Although Anna had been Li Anping's wife for many years, she had never had the self-awareness of being a member of the royal family. She also never put on airs. However, after learning about the behavior of the two brats, she immediately became anxious and angry. That was why she personally joined the hunt. The two brats who ran away were naturally Li Anping's children. The black-haired boy was called Li Nian. He was the son of Li Anping and Anna. The white-haired lowly was called Li Sisi. Her nickname was Xiao Hui. She was the daughter of Xia Yunyun and Li Anping. Li Sisi was conceived before Li Nian. However, Li Sisi stayed in Xia Yunyun's stomach for 2 whole years. That was why she was born 1 year later than Li Nian and became the younger sister. Seeing Anna's anxious expression, Xia Yunyun comforted her. "It's fine. Those two brats are very powerful. Even a normal level 5 ability user would die if they are careless. As long as they don't leave the city, there won't be a problem." "I know. However, this is the first time they have gone so far away. If they are out of the range of the Mystic Net, At this point, Anna frowned again. Although she was already in her 30s, she still looked as young and beautiful as when she was in her 20s due to the maintenance of nanomaterials and her own cultivation. She did not look like someone who had a son at all. At this moment, her frown made one feel a heartache. Found them. At this moment, Wang Ku's voice rang in everyone's ears. A video file was directly uploaded to everyone's personal terminal through the Mystic Net. At this moment, the Mystic Net had already become a second world for the entire human race. It was the foundation of their lives. Other than being able to use nanomaterials in the real world according to their authority and electronic currency, the virtual network formed by the Mystic Net allowed everyone to connect to the virtual world through their consciousness every minute and every second. However, due to Li Anping's absence, other than the artificial intelligence system, no one could mobilize the entire Earth's surveillance data. Therefore, even Anna and Xia Yunyun could only use the base's own surveillance methods to find Li Nian and Li Sisi. However, Li Nian had a very strong electromagnetic ability. Not only could he read people's thoughts based on their radio waves, but he could also control most of the mechanical equipment, making their search even more troublesome. 5 minutes ago, a white light flashed and Li Nian appeared in a corner near the warp gate with Li Sisi on his back. In less than a second, Li Nian had already memorized the entire scene in front of him. Everyone's position and the direction of each monitoring device. Sit tight. Yes. Xiao Hui nodded obediently. He hugged Li Nian's neck tightly and closed his eyes tightly. The next moment, the feeling of moving as fast as lightning hit them in the face. Small balls of blue electric light flashed on their bodies. They were like a breeze, following Xia Dragonfinch's soldiers and directly entering the warp gate. A group of Xia Dragonfinch's soldiers disappeared in the blue light of the warp gate. No one noticed that a boy and a girl had appeared in the blue light. After arriving at the moon base through the warp gate, Li Nian felt his feet sink and the burden on his body increased. He knew that this was because the gravity of the moon base was twice that of Earth. In some dangerous areas, the gravity was more than 100 times that of Earth. However, even so, his body only sank slightly and he quickly walked through the corridors of the moon base with Xiao Hui on his back. It didn't take long for him and Xiao Hui to adapt to the high-gravity environment. However, this time was different from the previous sprint. Li Nian was like an assassin, always able to hide in the shadows and corners, carefully avoiding batch after batch of soldiers and monitoring devices. Little Hui, who was on his back, also had a serious look on his face. He didn't even dare to breathe loudly, and his eyes were wide open. From Li Nian's actions, it was obvious that he had received a considerable degree of stealth training. Whether it was speed, skills, or psychological quality, he was comparable to an ordinary agent. However, this was the moon base after all, a place where all the elite soldiers of mankind gathered. Just as Li Nian was hiding in a corner with Xiao Hui on his back, a man's voice appeared directly behind him. "Why are the two of you here at the moon base?" The man approached the two silently. The sudden appearance of his voice startled Li Nian and Xiao Hui. Li Nian turned around and realized that Yan Bei had appeared behind him without him noticing. He was looking at them suspiciously. Uncle Yan," Li Nian said awkwardly. Xiao Hui on his back stared at Yan Bei pitifully like a puppy. Suddenly, Li Nian rolled his eyes and said, "Uncle Bai is going to train us today. The training location is in the Land of White." Land of White. Yan Bei frowned. He had already begun to contact Bai Xinghe, who was overseeing the Land of White, through the Mystic Net. However, Li Nian wanted the other party to be distracted for a moment because he knew that no matter what lie he told, Yan Bei would be able to immediately expose the lie through the Mystic Net. Therefore, he only wanted the other party to be distracted for a moment. Just as Yan Bei was distracted, a ball of electric light lit up on Li Nian's body. Not only did the electric light spread to his body, but it also spread to Xiao Hui without any hindrance. With a flash of the electric light and a sonic boom, the two of them had already rushed into the distance at supersonic speed. The thunderous sound of their feet stepping on the ground alarmed the surrounding soldiers. These two brats! Unfortunately, Yanbei could not use his ability to attack the two of them. Just as he quickly caught up, the two of them had disappeared around a corner. At this time, he had also contacted the people from the left branch on Earth and by Xinghe on the Land of White. Is that so? I just met them. But Xiao Hui used his ability to teleport away. Just as he finished talking to the few of them, another message was transmitted to the personal terminals of the few human leaders. At the edge of the solar system, an electromagnetic wave signal of unknown origin was discovered. On the other side of the transmigration gate, various changes were also taking place in the Land of White. On the Land of White, humans built a city called Chauga, or rather, a base with the first transmigration gate discovered as the center. Within a radius of 100,000 kilometers around this base, humans were divided into 7,200 sectors. Most of these sectors were barren lands, and a small number of them were inhabited by some native races of the Land of White. Most of them had been exterminated by humans. Other than that, there were also many unstable spacetime zones. Through the method left behind by Li Anping, humans had set up many transmigration gates. Most of these transmigration gates led to harsh cosmic environments, uninhabited starry skies, and empty space. However, there were also a small number of them that led to resource planets with rich materials. There were even life planets that were like magical planets that nurtured unique civilizations. However, although these planets had their own unique characteristics, and their civilizations were all dominant on the other side of the transmigration gate, they were unable to put up any resistance when faced with the humans who swept in. They could only become colonies for the human army. There were modern societies that were similar to Earth, continents that were still ruled by feudal dynasties, martial arts civilizations that could release sword chi and saber chi, and fantasy worlds that had vampires, werewolves, and so on. Humans followed the orders left behind by Li Anping. While they continued to increase their strength, they continued to expand their territory, bringing all the civilizations and races under their rule. Most of these civilizations were unable to put up any resistance when faced with the current humans. The floating battleships alone were enough to crush most of the races, not to mention the high-level ability users and the warriors with interstellar armors. The armors worn by these warriors were something that those civilizations couldn't even break through. However, a small number of them, like the magic civilization, had a great difference in their individual strength. The experts who had the destructive power of the 5th level or above posed a greater threat to Earth's civilization, but it only took a little more effort. After all, after 7 years of explosive development on Earth, everyone was an ability user. The ordinary people either practiced secret martial arts or magic. The average level of those who graduated from high school this year was 2. For, moreover, with the help of advanced technology such as nanoworms and quantum computers, other than the addition of many level 5 ability users, all the level 5 ability users who were originally gifted had now become level 6 ability users. Among them, Bai Xinghe had even become the first level 7 ability user of mankind. He guarded the Land of White all year round to prevent the attacks of the demons. Right now, in the sky 200,000 kilometers west of Xiaoga City, a huge palace that spanned several hundred kilometers was slowly drifting toward Xiaoga City. At the edge of the palace, Shang Tian, who was wearing a purple-gold Taoist robe, stood on a cloud, gazing deeply in the direction of Xiaoga City, even though he couldn't see anything from where he was standing. Shang Tian, who had broken through to the Yuanying realm a long time ago, looked no different from a young man in his 20s, even though he was only about 10 years old at the moment. His ability allowed him to communicate with his past selves in countless timelines, bringing him incomparable information and intelligence. It was as if he had the guidance of countless great masters, and he was able to obtain many miraculous encounters, improving at a remarkable speed. Even in the Purple Cloud Palace, a force where geniuses were everywhere, Shang Tian had become one of the top 10 direct disciples. However, there was still hatred in his heart. He hated Li Anping and hated himself for not being able to awaken his ability earlier to save his family. He hated himself for not being able to suppress Li Anping and could only use the most cowardly method to deal with him. Looking in the direction of Zhaoga City, Shang Tian mumbled, "I'm back. Li Anping, are you ready? Greet my fury. Greet this hatred that stretches across endless space-time. You'll become the sharp sword in my hand, and all of the humans will accept my rule. I'm the king of the humans, while you're just a malignant tumor in the multivariate universe." Just as Shang Tian was mumbling to himself, a Dao soldier wearing golden armor walked up behind him and reported, "Eldest senior brother, Master has asked for you to go to the Shangqing Palace for a discussion." "Got it." Shang Tian waved his hand and dismissed the Dao soldier. Then, he took one last long look in the direction of Zhaoga City before disappearing. Chapter 452. Shang Tian slowly walked towards the Shangqing Palace. The Purple Cloud Palace, which seemed to only occupy a few dozen kilometers, actually contained countless spaces of various sizes. If all of them were folded, it would probably be as big as 10 Earths. Even if Shang Tian wanted to walk to the Shangqing Palace now, it would probably take him a few months. However, the Purple Cloud Palace naturally had a solution for such a situation. The ubiquitous teleportation portals were specifically used to shorten the distance within the Purple Cloud Palace. Even so, after switching through 12 teleportation portals in a row and spending 15 minutes, Shang Tian stepped into the Shangqing Palace. This was the most important meeting hall of the Purple Cloud Palace. Every time something major happened in the sect, the elders and the 10 true disciples of the sect would be gathered for a meeting. The so-called 10 true disciples were not arranged according to the strength of the disciples, nor were there any competitions. The 10 true disciples were personally selected by the previous generation of true disciples. They had to go through the 5 major tests of Tao Heart, Tao Nature, Root Vessel, Potential, and Luck. They had to accumulate enough contributions to the sect, and make all kinds of contributions. They also had to obtain the approval of the sect master and the 5 elders of the Purple Cloud Palace before they could become candidates of true disciples. Then, after breaking through to the nascent soul realm, the previous generation of true disciples would become immortal soul venerables. Only then could they become the new generation of true disciples and cultivate the 10 fundamental magical powers of the Purple Cloud Palace. The true disciples of each lineage could only cultivate one of the 10 fundamental divine abilities. Only after becoming immortal soul venerables could they choose 2 more fundamental magical powers. Only the sect master and the 5 elders of the Purple Cloud Palace of each generation could cultivate more than 5 fundamental magical powers. The Purple Cloud Palace was very strict in the selection of true disciples, and the care with which the 10 fundamental magical powers were passed down showed the power of these 10 magical powers and the importance of the position of true disciples. The 10 true disciples could be said to be the backbone of the Purple Cloud Palace and the future leaders. The process of becoming one of the 10 true disciples was also an extremely difficult one. The least of them usually took 70 or 80 years. There were even some who took 100 or 200 years. However, just 2 years ago, a young man named Shang Tian actually became a true disciple of the Immortal Ascension Hall of the Purple Cloud Palace and became one of the 10 true disciples. The time it took him was only a short 5 years. Although this legendary speed was surprising, it was within the expectations of most people who were in the know. As he slowly walked into the Shangqing Palace, he saw that the other 9 true disciples had already arrived. The seat of the headmaster and the other elders were still empty. A young lady in ancient costume waved at Shang Tian and said, "Little Tian, come here quickly. We were just talking about you." Shang Tian smiled humbly, just like an ordinary wooden youth. He carefully hid his sharpness and walked to the girl's side and sat down. The young girl's name was Hua Baihe. She was a true disciple of the Purple Cloud Palace's Star Cluster Hall. Although she appeared to be in her 20s, she had actually lived for more than 700 years after reaching the nascent soul stage. Seeing Shang Tian sitting over, she asked, "This time, the heavenly court ordered us to reclaim Earth. Little Tian, you are from Earth, tell us about it." "Senior Sister Hua, can you stop calling me Little Tian?" Shang Tian smiled bitterly and said, "I have already reported the information about Earth to the headmaster and the heavenly court. Today, they called us here to talk about this matter. You just need to listen to them later." "Oh, you are only 10 years old. Don't think that just because you look like an adult, you are really an adult." Hua Baihe knocked Shang Tian's head and said, "In my place, you are Little Tian. Little Tian, tell me what Earth is like. I heard that there are only mortals there, but those mortals have no magic power. How can they go to the sky and the sea? I stay in the small immortal world all day to cultivate. I am so bored that I am going to fall sick. Why don't you tell me about Earth to relieve my boredom?" "All right, Baihe, don't make things difficult for him." On the other side, a valiant youth with a long sword on his back said, "I think the heavenly court asked him to keep it a secret, so he can't tell us." Shang Tian smiled and cupped his hands at the valiant youth, saying, "Thank you, senior brother Jianwei." However, no one noticed that deep in his gentle smile, there was always a hint of coldness. This youth called Jianwei was the true disciple of the Purple Cloud Palace's myriad sword peak. He had been a true disciple for the longest time among the current 10 true disciples. His cultivation was enough to be ranked in the top 3 among the 10 true disciples. Hua Baihe heard them say that and pouted, but she did not ask any more questions. Not long after, the elders of the Purple Cloud Palace rushed to the Shangqing Palace. They either came on their swords or came in the form of light. Some directly broke through the sky to project themselves, some sent their own disciples, and some even sent their spirit beasts as representatives. After about 4 hours, everyone except the Purple Cloud Palace's headmaster and the Purple Cloud 5 elders arrived one by one. The reason why it took so long was related to the Purple Cloud Palace's concept of time. This was because they could easily live hundreds or thousands of years. Every time they cultivated in seclusion, it might be hundreds of years. This made their concept of time completely different from the people of Earth. 4 hours of waiting time was no different from 10 minutes to them. None of them showed any signs of impatience as they waited. Some of them were even seizing the time to cultivate while they were waiting. As for those who did not come with their real bodies, they were either wandering or cultivating in seclusion. Finally, a white-haired man wearing a purple crown and a purple robe walked into the Shangqing Palace. Behind him were 5 men and women of different shape. They were the ultimate power of the Purple Cloud sect, the Purple Cloud 5 elders. Including the Purple Cloud sect's headmaster, these 6 people were all above the essence soul venerable. Their cultivation had reached the celestial being void transformation. They were only one step away from the celestial being life transformation. Each of them had the power to capture the stars and the moon, move mountains and overturn seas. At the same time, Earth clearly had not noticed the expeditionary army on the land of white. They were concentrating on cracking the electromagnetic signals found at the edge of the solar system. A sergeant pointed at the star map in the command room, which was the edge of the solar system, and said, "We found the electromagnetic signals here. According to the latest information, we also found a large amount of thermal radiation remnant." The universe should be a vacuum, and things like thermal radiation were like stars in the night sky. It was so obvious in the vacuum of the universe. Hearing the sergeant's report, Xia Likong frowned and said, "Have you checked the recent space records? Is there a civilian spaceship that passed by?" "We've checked the space records for the past 6 months. No civilian or military spacecraft will pass by there. The General Staff suspects that an unknown spacecraft is approaching the solar system." Chapter 453. After spending 7 years, the Silver Shadow Empire's fleet finally arrived at the outer regions of the solar system and started to gather information on the Earthlings. Fleet Commander Russell, who had just woken up from his sleeping cabin, shook his slightly uncomfortable neck, exhaled, and asked fiercely, "How is it? How many resource planets are there in this galaxy? Are there any natives?" It was already very unlucky for him to be sent by the Empire to this remote star region in the middle of nowhere. If he could not gain anything here, he would be even more unlucky. He would have wasted over 10 years for nothing, and there would be no way for him to reason with. He could not possibly accuse Reinhardt, the current superhero of the entire Empire, of having problems. The adjutant said, "According to the results of the detection array, this galaxy has a total of 1 fixed star, 8 planets, and 173 satellites. There are a total of 32 planets that can be used as resource planet. Among them, there are traces of intelligent life on 7 of them." He pointed to the star map in front of him and waved his hands. The 3rd planet in the solar system appeared before Russell's eyes. "This planet has the most people. From the looks of it, their appearance is similar to ours, and their body structure is also very similar. They should also belong to the human race." "They're also from the human race?" Luo Su nodded his head. This wasn't the first time the Silver Shadow Empire had encountered humans. Although they looked similar, Luo Su wouldn't treat these natives as his own kind. Slaves or cannon fodder were the best fate for these people. "How is their civilization?" The adjutant said, "The photonic brain has already connected to their electronic circuit. From the looks of it, they've already set up an internal network and are connecting to the language library to translate their information. However, a conservative estimate is that they already have the most basic interstellar colonization ability. Other than this planet, the other 2 planets and 4 satellites that have been discovered with signs of civilization should all be their colonization planet. They've just started to colonize planets in the planetary system. Does that mean that they're very weak?" Roland smiled coldly and said, "Get the people from the engineering team to quickly open the Stargate and create artificial wormholes. I don't wish to waste a few more years on the return journey." As for the humans in this planetary system, Russell pointed at Earth's position on the star map and said, "Send a Hunter-class spaceship to their main planet and give them 1 month to surrender unconditionally." The reason why they only sent a small spaceship into the solar system was that the Silver Shadow Empire's fleet was too large. If they rashly entered the planetary system, it would cause the gravitational force of the entire planetary system to change. But even so, an Empire Hunger-class spaceship was 22 kilometers long. The main cannons and protective shields on it were more than enough to wipe out these country bumpkins. Thinking of this, Russell added, "Also, tell them not to go overboard. I still need these natives to help us find things." With technology that was thousands or even tens of thousands of years old, the Empire's expeditionary army's attitude toward the various indigenous civilizations was never very good. All sorts of atrocious incidents such as torture, killing, and humiliation were endless. Luo Su had no intention of restricting his subordinates, as long as they didn't go overboard. On the other side, Earth had also noticed some of the other party's movements. "Sir, according to the AI report, the other party has connected to our network. Sir, they've sent a spaceship into the solar system in the direction of Earth. They'll arrive in about 10 hours. Block their connection to the network. Xia Likong frowned and said, send 10 unmanned surveillance spaceships to receive them. Send signals to them and find out their intentions. Also, how's their spaceship technology? In the command room, a large amount of information about the other party's spaceship was displayed. This Silver Shadow Empire's expeditionary army had a total of over 2 million spaceships. The largest main spaceship was 500 kilometers long, and the slightly smaller spaceships were about 100 kilometers long. The remaining spaceships were the ones that Russell called Hunger-class spaceship. There were about 2 million of them. Based on the AI's analysis of Fangdong, the other party might also possess force field shield technology, controllable wormhole technology, and curvature engine technology. When these data appeared before everyone, Xia Likong also frowned deeply. As expected, the other party's technological level was very high. It was impossible for an alien civilization that could travel between galaxies to be weak in terms of technological means. Although it was still unknown how their technological level was compared to humans, just the curvature engine technology alone was enough to confirm that they were definitely not simple. Also, regarding the number of spaceships, they had to find out if the other party thought that over 2 million spaceships were a lot or a small number, and if they were the full force or the vanguard. Just as these flashed past Xiao Yekong's mind, and he threw the matter of his great-granddaughter running away from home to the back of his mind, the other party had once again sent out an electromagnetic wave signal. Sir, it's the Xia language, the adjutant next to Xia Likong said. The other party has already analyzed our language. What did they say? That adjutant said with some hesitation. They said, surrender or perish. Then another large portion of the signal was captured by the Earth's army. Earthlings, we're the 23rd expedition team of the Silver Shadow Empire's Milky Way army. 10 hours later, our Hunger-class spaceship will stop above your home planet. You have 1 month to prepare to surrender unconditionally and then accept our rule. You'll be fortunate enough to become a part of the Empire's territory. Thank the Empire for its mercy, Earthlings. Just as humans were making contact with the extraterrestrial civilizations of this universe for the first time, in Chaoga City, Li Nian was happily wandering around the Chaoga market with Li Sisi. Unlike on Earth, the entire planet had been covered by the mystic net and nanoworms, and all shopping, work, and living could be carried out in the virtual world. In Chaoga City, there were no nanoworms densely covering the city, and they still needed to use personal computers or communication devices to surf the internet. Moreover, in addition to the Earthlings in Chaoga City, there were many other immigrants who came to Chaoga City after being colonized by the Earthlings to do business, work, or cooperate with the Earthlings. Among them were merchants, officials, and royalty. There were swordsmen who carried sword cases and wore long robes, and there were also mages who held magic staffs and wore tall hats. There were even subspecies with wolf heads and human bodies, with pointy ears and slender elves. Chaoga City was the center of the teleportation portals in the nearby 7,200 sectors. Its superior geographical location, as well as the good order maintained by humans, made it the best area for communication between countless worlds. It also became the largest and most prosperous market, and in this city, the Earthlings were the well-deserved kings. Chapter 454. Li Nian held his sister's hand as they walked in the market of Chaoga City. Looking at the various stalls and shops selling all kinds of strange goods, her eyes were filled with curiosity. Xiao Hui hid behind Li Nian obediently, her eyes also attracted by the various races in front of her. Suddenly, a puppy-like fur ball appeared at the corner of the street. The pair of big eyes on the fur ball looked at Xiao Hui, and the cute appearance like a plush toy immediately attracted Xiao Hui's attention. She squatted down and reached out to pet the little fur ball. The furball, who was being stroked, trembled, and the snow-white fur all over its body slowly turned pink, as if it was embarrassed. Xiao Hui giggled at the sight. But the next moment, the fur ball expanded to the size of a watermelon, and an old voice said angrily, "Human, what are you touching? Have you no manners? I'm not your pet." It turned out that the fur ball turned pink not because it was shy but because it was angry. Xiao Hui stuck out her tongue and said, "Sorry." She immediately bounced and hid behind Lin Yan. Lin Yan smiled and stroked Xiao Hui's head, then walked deeper into the market. They came here mainly to find a team that could take them out of the city. Their purpose was to find Li Anping, who had left Earth 7 years ago, and find their father. However, after walking for a few hundred meters and seeing the man in front of him, Lin Yan knew that her plan to leave home had failed. Bai Xinghe walked to Lin Yan and said coldly, "Take Xiao Hui back by yourself and stay in the gravity room for 72 hours. Hearing Bai Xinghe's words, Lin Yan, who was only 7 years old, showed a nervous expression on his white and tender face. However, he still controlled himself and did not move. Since he was born, everything related to fighting, abilities, and martial arts was learned from the man in front of him. He had no memory of his father at all. In comparison, Bai Xinghe, as his teacher and master, was more dignified in front of him. He was also the only person in this world that he was afraid of. However, he still braced himself and turned into a flash of lightning to retreat. Looking at Lin Yan, who was running away quickly, Bai Xinghe was not surprised at all. He simply pursed his lips and chased after him. He knew that since Lin Yan was born, he could use part of the electromagnetic drive ability. Moreover, as his body gradually developed, as time passed, his electromagnetic drive ability became stronger and stronger. At present, among the humans on Earth, there were no level 4 ability users who could defeat him. Even among the level 5 ability users, if they did not coincidentally restrain him, it would take a lot of effort to fight him. Not only was Lin Yan's combat ability, but her memory, comprehension, and logic were also outstanding. Also, thanks to Bai Xinghe's careful tutelage, he was able to carry out 200% of his abilities in a battle. However, it was precisely this kind of talent that made it even harder for the other party to control. As expected of your son, it's hard to imagine what he will become when he grows up. He should be a good opponent. The feeling of training Lin Yan was like creating a strong opponent for Bai Xinghe. He was quite interested in it. While he was sighing in his heart, his hands did not slow down at all. As he moved, the whole earth seemed to be shaking under his feet. It was not just the ground that was shaking. In Lin Yan's senses, the other party took a step forward and then reached out his hand. There was an overwhelming aura that encompassed the void space in all directions. It was a power that dominated the world, and even people's hearts, space-time, and karma would be distorted. But Lin Yan was not surprised at all. As his teacher, Bai Xinghe naturally knew how horrifying the other party was. Bai Xinghe was like an irresistible, high and mighty king of gods who had everything under his control. After the movement, not only did Lin Yan's mind suffer all kinds of pressure, even the various species in the market passed out because of Bai Xinghe's grabbing. They couldn't stand Bai Xinghe's aura and fell into a coma to protect themselves. Lin Yan's body, on the other hand, was fully activated. Electric arcs were surging all over his body. Like a jet, he retreated at twice the speed of sound. But despite his speed, Lin Yan still had the absurd feeling that there was nowhere to hide when he looked at the hand that was approaching him inch by inch. However, when Bai Xinghe's hand was about to grab Lin Yan's body, after a series of cracking sounds, Lin Yan's body was already gone. It turned out to be his electromagnetic doppelganger. Through the combination of air, water, light, and electromagnetic force, the result was so realistic that it looked like the real thing. Lin Yan, who was 200 meters away, smiled proudly as he ran. However, before his smile faded, a palm was already coming toward his body again. After a crack, Bai Xinghe grabbed Li Nian's shoulder from a distance. Li Nian felt that the electric arcs all over his body were shattered into pieces by the other party's shake. The electromagnetic force was dispersed instantly, but his body was not damaged at all. Although the electromagnetic force was gone, he was still running at a high speed. As a result, he lost his balance and fell to the ground with Xiao Hui on his back. But the next moment, a gentle force lifted the two of them up. Bai Xinghe held Xiao Hui in one hand and grabbed Li Nian with the other, as if he were grabbing a chicken. He scolded, "Running away from home with your sister, is this what you should do?" Li Nian felt that his body seemed to have been locked by a force, and it was impossible for him to use his electromagnetic propulsion ability anymore. Hearing Bai Xinghe's scolding, Xiao Hui wrinkled her nose and said in fear, "Uncle Bai, don't blame my brother." It was Xiao Hui who wanted to see Daddy. Bai Xinghe did not scold Xiao Hui. He simply said softly, "All right, Xiao Hui. Let your brother take you back." Then, he said to Li Nian with a straight face, "After you send Xiao Hui off, don't forget to go to the gravity room yourself. I'll help you with special training in the next 2 days." Hearing the words, special training, Li Nian's body trembled, as if he had thought of something terrible. He nodded with a bitter expression and left with his sister. It wasn't until the two of them disappeared into the portal that Bai Xinghe lifted his head and looked at the high sky above Zhaoge City. High in the sky, two men in Taoist robes and standing on the white clouds were sizing up the large city on the ground. An invisible shield of chaotic energy surrounded them, blocking the hurricane and low temperature in the sky. One of the men said, "These earthlings are indeed interesting and have invented many interesting things. But these are not enough to move the heavenly court." The man asked the other man beside him curiously, "Senior brother Tianxian, what is Shang Tian's identity? How could he become a direct disciple in 5 years and stir up the heavenly court?" The man called Senior brother Tianxian stared at the boundless city under his feet and said calmly, "This kid was born with an external method of primordial spirit. But this alone is not enough to become a direct disciple of our Purple Cloud Palace. Only the Master and the 5 elders know about his real background. I guess he might be a reincarnated soul of some important figure in the heavenly court." "That's possible. I think he talks like an old man and he seems to be at ease. He doesn't look like an ordinary 10-year-old kid." The man sneered, "It's ridiculous that Hua Baihe still treats him as a kid and thinks he's in the palm of her hand. That's not necessarily true. Those direct disciples are all cautious and cunning. Hua Baihe and Shang Tian are friends. I'm afraid that the one in the Hall of Stars also wants to test Shang Tian's background." While the two of them were talking, a figure suddenly appeared behind them slowly. "You two, you've been watching from above for a long time. Have you seen enough?" Tianxian was shocked. The flames on his body surged, and a huge blazing dragon shield of 9 flames protected his body. His junior brother spurted out a substance that looked like a galaxy from his mouth, which turned into starlight and enveloped his body. "Who are you?" Tianxian looked at the man in front of him warily. The man was obviously not an ordinary figure since he could appear behind him without being detected. "Oh, I'm the city lord of Zhaoge City. You two have been watching from above my head for almost half an hour. It would be a dereliction of my duty if I didn't do anything about it. However, since there are 2 of you, I only need one of you alive." Tianxian blinked his eyes and snapped his fingers. A streak of true samadhi fire shot toward the man like a shooting star. The power of the true samadhi fire was enough to burn down a small human town. However, although his reaction was very fast, he was still too slow compared to Bai Xinghe, who had been through hundreds of battles and whose body had reached the peak. He could only feel that an overwhelming force was shooting in all directions with the man in front of him as the center. The man seemed to be holding a force that could destroy the entire world. he punched at his junior brother from a distance. His junior brother's protective magical equipment was called the Star River Magnetic Sword Array, which was refined with the help of the heavenly star silver sand. It could agitate the magnetic field and combine the heavenly star silver sand into tens of thousands of flying swords. Each grain of sand could also attack on its own. It was extremely powerful in both offense and defense. However, faced with the man's punch from a distance, countless grains of heavenly star silver sand seemed to have become ordinary grains of sand. After a boom, the Star River Magnetic Sword Array, the purple cloud smoke, the defense barrier, and the Taoist robe on his junior brother all exploded. His junior brother had turned into a pool of blood and fell to the ground. His entire body, including his core, had been blown up by Xinghe's punch. The true samadhi fire that Tian Xian unleashed, which was enough to burn a town into ashes, had been grasped in by Xinghe's hand casually. Looking at the true samadhi fire that was struggling like a snake but was of no use, Tian Xian felt cold sweat dripping down his forehead. Xinghe looked at the true samadhi fire that was wriggling in his hand as if it were alive but was held tightly by him. He turned around and looked at Tian Xian, asking casually, "Then, what is the Purple Cloud Palace?" Chapter 455. While Xinghe was interrogating Tian Xian to obtain information about the Purple Cloud Palace, Xia Likong was also having an endless discussion on how to deal with the Silver Shadow Empire. "We've discovered that they're creating artificial wormholes. This means that the fleet before us is just a part of their army. If what they say is true, and the 2 million spaceships before us are just a part of the Silver Shadow Empire's army, they'll be able to colonize different star systems. The number of their armies will far exceed our previous expectations. What we lack the most now is strategic depth. Once we start fighting, they can destroy the solar system and planets without any qualms. However, we can't. We only have Earth." According to what they said, this is only the 23rd expedition team of the Star River Army. The most conservative estimate is that the Silver Shadow Empire's total military strength is at least 50 million battleships. To be able to supply and produce such a large-scale fleet of battleships, they must own and occupy at least 20 planetary systems that are similar to the solar system. Moreover, this is just the lowest number. The reality may be even worse. We have to be prepared to fight against hundreds of millions or even billions of battleships. Hundreds of millions of battleships. Hearing this number, everyone in the General Staff Unit could not help but groan. Being drowned by the vast number of enemy battleships was the thing that the General Staff Unit was most worried about. 10 years ago, it would take humans several years to build an aircraft carrier. Even now, with the existence of nanomites and a great leap in productivity, it would still take humans 1 week to build a cosmic battleship that was more than 10 kilometers long. Excluding the existence of aptitude users, a cosmic battleship that was more than 10 kilometers long would have an overwhelming advantage over all land and air forces, regardless of whether it was the power, energy, main cannons, armor, or force field shields that the battleship possessed. Right now, the entire human race only had slightly over 300 cosmic battleships, and all of them were 10 kilometers long. Moreover, before they were clear about the difference in battleships, Earth would not send out these over 300 cosmic battleships easily. Right now, the top priority is how to deal with this fleet outside the solar system. We have to wipe them out once and for all and then destroy the artificial wormholes that they're creating to prevent their reinforcements from arriving. We also have to find out the exact scale of the Silver Shadow Empire, where they are, how far away they are from us, and how much military strength they have. How advanced is their technology? The most troublesome problem was that Earth wasn't the best at space battles, but the ground and air battles that were dominated by ability users. The universe was simply too vast. Thousands of kilometers, tens of thousands of kilometers, in the vacuum of the universe, was even smaller than a strand of hair. Most magic, martial arts, and superpowers could not fight across tens of thousands of kilometers. However, tens of thousands of kilometers was within the range of a space battleship. Xia Likong thought for a while and came to the conclusion that the experts in the space station who could play a big role were probably only him, Bai Xinghe, Fang Yuhuang, and Emma. As for Jin Guang, Yan Bei, Zhu Di, and the other powerful aptitude users, if they didn't team up with Fang Yuhuang, Emma, and the others, they wouldn't be of much use in the space battlefield that was tens of millions of kilometers away. Other than that, the most reliable thing was probably the super weapon left behind by Lianping. 2 million battleships are still within our ability to deal with. Xia Likong frowned. But if it really breaks through 10 million or even 100 million, we have to deal with those wormholes as soon as possible to prevent their reinforcements from arriving immediately. We have to buy time for Earth. Thus, under his orders, Emma and Jin Guang set off together to intercept the enemy's spaceship that was already approaching. On the other hand, Earth would use the super weapon left behind by Lianping to think of a way to deal with 2 million space battleships and artificial wormholes in one go. However, Xia Likong knew that even so, humanity had only temporarily stopped the first attack of the enemy. A bigger test might be in the near future. At this moment, he really hoped that Lianping could return quickly. 6 hours later, in the Silver Shadow Empire's fleet, the current fleet was still floating outside the solar system. Of course, there were several explanations for the so-called solar system's boundary. The current fleet was at the boundary of the entire solar system's planet. It was over 50 astronomical units away from the Sun, which was about 70 million kilometers away. Russell sat in the flagship's cafeteria as usual. He looked at the endless space outside the window and tasted the food that the robotic chef had cooked for him. Each time he saw the extremely vast universe that he would not be able to explore completely in his lifetime, he would feel excited. This might be the reason why he became a captain. Just then, his adjutant sent him the latest information regarding Earth. This was the data that the flagship's artificial intelligence system had downloaded before it was disconnected from the network. When he saw the content regarding superpowers, magic, and martial arts on Earth, Russell could not help but laugh. He had not expected that a civilization that had already left their own planet would still believe in such unscientific things. What a strange race! Russell shook his head and continued reading. He realized that their political system was the same as the Silver Shadow Empire's, which was also an imperial system. However, their propaganda of their emperor was a little exaggerated. Things like moving planets' orbits, creating continents with a raise of their hands, and grabbing the stars and the moon. They were just like gods. However, their citizens seemed to believe in such propaganda. Earthlings are really boring. Just then, the adjutant's communication request suddenly rang in Russell's ears. Captain, we've discovered an unknown living creature in the center of the fleet. Unknown living creature. Russell recalled Reinhardt's instructions to him and said in shock, "Is it the Zerg?" "No, it's not. It seems to be a human." The next moment, an image jumped out in front of Russell. It was Fang Yuhuang wearing an interstellar mecha. Fang Yuhuang had already reached the 6th energy level, and his 33 grotto heavens had also reached the 3rd grotto heaven. Every time he crossed a distance of more than 1.07 million kilometers, which meant that although he only crossed a distance of 1 meter with each step, his speed had already surpassed the speed of light to the surrounding space, reaching 3 times the speed of light. However, this kind of long-distance crossing was obviously not without limit. He had traveled all the way from Earth to here, stopping and walking, and it had taken him more than 4 hours. Russell looked at Fang Yuhuang in the image in surprise and shouted, "Who is this person? From that battleship?" "He's not one of us," the adjutant said awkwardly. He seems to be an Earthling. How is that possible? Russell shouted, hurry up and find him. Find out how he appeared here. At this moment, Fang Yuhuang released 3 palm-sized black spherical objects from his mech. Then, he took a step forward and disappeared from sight. What's going on? Where is he? Russell said angrily. No, I don't know. The adjutant was also shocked. All kinds of instruments began to detect Fang Yuhuang's previous position. Captain, we've detected a large number of gravitons. He might have left some kind of gravity bomb. Gravity bomb? In Russell's impression, the Empire's gravity bomb only had an effective range of a few kilometers. The distance between the battleships was more than 100 kilometers. What was the use of gravity bombs here? However, what he did not know was that the graviton bombs in front of him were personally created by Lianping. They could create gravitons in large quantities through mass energy conversion and void creation. There were only a total of 10 graviton bombs on Earth. In order to completely destroy the expeditionary army in one go, after careful calculation, Bai Xinghe was given 3 graviton bombs to the specific coordinates. Russell furrowed his brows and said, "Send someone." Before he could finish his sentence, a terrifying gravitational force covered the surroundings at close to the speed of light. At a speed of more than 10 million kilometers, other than the speed of light, nothing could escape from this force field. The entire Silver Shadow Empire's expeditionary army was suppressed into wreckage by the huge gravitational force in this attack. The artificial wormhole, which was also the Stargate, lost the continuous control of the device and gradually closed and dissipated. In front of Reinhardt, an official was reporting to him about the expeditionary army's situation. Is that so? The committee has approved Earth's colonization operation and asked them to quickly occupy the local planets and do their best to search for all information related to the Zergs. Suddenly, the other party's countenance changed. It was as if he had received some new news. Reinhardt asked, "What's wrong, sir?" "We've lost contact with the expeditionary army. The Stargate has also been closed." Reinhardt's eyes flickered, and various thoughts flashed through his mind. According to the information sent by Russell, there's no civilization that can defeat them there. Investigate what's going on. Also, are the coordinates of the wormhole still there? They're still there, the official said. If there's a need, we can activate the Stargate at any time. They might have encountered some kind of accident. Should we send someone over? Reinhardt gave it some thought and said, "Inform the 16th, 17th, and 21st Expeditionary Armies and get them to get ready. I'll apply to the committee to send them over." It could be foreseen that as the Silver Shadow Empire's troops continued to be deployed, the battle with Earth would become increasingly intense. Although Earth's technological level was slightly higher than that of the Silver Shadow Empires, they had a vast territory and had a history of over 5,000 years of interstellar colonization. The Silver Shadow Empire, which had occupied several hundred planets, had a war potential that Earth was far from being able to match up to. Just like how the Silver Shadow Empire had lacked an effective method to deal with the Zerg's numbers, Earth was currently facing the same problem of numbers. The Silver Shadow Empire might be able to withstand a failure like the 23rd Expeditionary Armies over 100 times. However, Earth only had one chance. Just as Earth was being targeted by 2 different influences, Lianping finally opened his eyes slowly. Chapter 456. Lianping opened his eyes and realized that he was sprawled out on a chair in the classroom. The physics teacher on the podium was giving a lecture, minding his own business. Lianping wanted to sweep the entire classroom to one side, but he realized that he had to turn his head. It had been a very long time since he had relied purely on his eyes to see things. However, at this moment, electromagnetic waves, infrared rays, thermal induction, sound waves, and nanoworms all left him. He could only turn his head and look at the scene in the classroom. Tiancheng University. Familiar yet unfamiliar classmates, the classroom that had always been in the depths of his memory, appeared before him just like that. Next to him, a male classmate patted him on the shoulder and said softly, "You're awake? We're going to play basketball in a while. Are you coming?" Fang Xinjian could no longer hear what the other party said next. His mind was filled with conflicting memories from the past and his current memories. It was as if he had had a dream and had finally woken up from it. It can't be a dream. Li Anping rejected this possibility. Although the scene before him was a little strange, he was still as calm and rational as ever. He started to think about the current situation. I only remember that I should have been fighting against the 3 super warriors from the thoughts of the 4 world. Is the situation before me some kind of special attack? Or is it that the part of me right now is a consciousness fragment that was shot down into a parallel spacetime? Just as Li Anping was thinking about these things, suddenly, the conversation of a few girls in front of him faintly entered his ears. "Have you heard? Li Anping. Police. I heard that he was killed, and has already been. What a pity. That's right. If only he were still." Li Anping no longer had superhuman hearing, so the conversation between the two of them could only be heard intermittently. Just then, the bell rang, signaling the end of the class. The students in the classroom did not wait for the teacher to say anything and just dispersed. The male classmate next to him patted Li Anping on the shoulder and said, "Are you going to play basketball?" Li Anping shook his head and did not say anything. He walked toward the dormitory based on his memory. Right now, he wanted to go online and find out what kind of world this was. Opening the web page, Li Anping began to browse through the latest news. Xia, the Ice Fortress, the East Continent, and the West Continent. Everything was the same as when he was in university. Li Anping started to search for information about superpowers. All kinds of novels, comics, and animations popped up. Then, he searched for Xia Dragonfinch, Xia Likong, Song Bang, Hades, and Wang Ku. But there was nothing. There was nothing at all. He couldn't find any of these people on the internet, and Li Anping didn't know any of the higher-ups in Xia either. Is it a parallel world? Just as Li Anping was feeling a little confused, a black phone on the table beside him rang. Li Anping took a look and realized that someone had probably forgotten to bring his phone. He ignored him and continued to search for information on the internet. However, the caller seemed to be very persistent and did not stop. Then, a boy walked into the dormitory and looked at Li Anping. Li Anping felt a sense of familiarity from the boy's appearance. He should be a classmate from the same dormitory, but he couldn't remember the boy's name or identity. My memory is fading? Li Anping felt that his memory ability and the data in his memory seemed to be fading. At this moment, the boy asked curiously, "Your phone is ringing. Aren't you going to answer it?" "My phone?" Li Anping looked at the black phone on the table strangely. He hadn't used a phone in a long time. He thought for a moment and took the phone in his hand. He looked at the caller ID and saw that it was Teacher Wang. He picked up the phone and a woman's voice came from the other end. "Hello? Is this Chin Bin? Did you forget again? Today is the day of our appointment. Come over quickly. I'll wait for you in the counseling room. Hello. You seem to have made a mistake, don't say any more. You must have forgotten again. Anyway, you'll know when you come over." Beep, beep, beep. The other party had already hung up the phone. Li Anping suddenly reacted. He opened his wallet and took out his ID card. When he saw the content, his face turned pale. He felt that it was ridiculous. Chin Bin. Next to his photo, there was a name that he had no impression of. He put the ID card back and hurried out of the door. "Hello, Chin Bin. If you're going to the cafeteria, bring me a meal." Li Anping ignored him. He closed the door and rushed to the school's counseling room. Opening the door, A middle-aged woman wearing a white robe was sitting behind the desk waiting for him. "You're here." The middle-aged woman doctor looked up at him and pointed to the sofa on the side and said, "Take a seat first. I know you have a lot of questions right now, but you should first look at these things." The middle-aged woman doctor handed him a stack of newspapers and a booklet. Lianping looked at the other party in confusion. He took the newspapers and booklet and began to read on the sofa. The more he read, the more Lianping's pupils contracted. An absurd and inconceivable feeling kept rising in his mind. The middle-aged woman doctor seemed to have already known how Lianping would react. While watching him read the news, she explained, 2 years ago, your family was involved in a car accident. You were the only one who survived. The driver who caused the accident escaped and hasn't been caught yet. Since then, you've also been suffering from autism. A year and a half ago, a retired Special Forces soldier named Lianping began to appear in the headlines. He killed many police officers, officials, and rich people by himself. I don't know the details, but many people on the internet idolized him. They thought he was a hero who killed corrupt officials, bullies, and got rid of evil for the people. From then on, your symptoms began to worsen and you began to hallucinate. You often thought you were Lianping and that you had superpowers. Impossible! Lianping stood up and stared at the newspaper. There was a picture of Lianping and a huge headline. Retired Special Forces soldier enters house to kill. The female doctor seemed to be used to Lianping's reaction. She said calmly, "In the past few months, your condition has been getting worse and worse. You've even started to experience memory loss intermittently." She pointed to the booklet that Lianping had thrown to the ground and said, "You can take a look at the contents of that booklet. You wrote them down yourself." Lianping slowly picked up the booklet and started to flip through it page by page. Xia Dragonfinch, superpowers, demons, light speed fist, and all sorts of memories were recorded in the booklet. All of the contents are from your own imagination. It's very easy to verify them, the female doctor said calmly. Can you explain the principles behind them? Can you explain the principles behind any of the fantasy skills or technologies and reproduce them in the real world? Lianping sat down on the sofa and kept on thinking. However, he was unable to understand the principles behind them. Electromagnetic drive, matter recombination, quantum computing. He was very familiar with their effects and functions. However, he had no way of realizing them. Just then, the female doctor spoke again. "Chunbin, I need you to cooperate with my treatment. With your current condition, if your condition continues to worsen, it will seriously threaten the lives of the other students. If that happens, I'll have no choice but to suggest that the school expel you from school. You'll also be sent to a sanatorium. Take a pill, take a shower, and go back to sleep. Don't look at the news related to Lianping anymore." Lianping sat down on the sofa. His last bit of calmness and rationality was on the verge of collapse. In a chaotic sea, colorful bubbles kept on appearing and floating into the air. Each bubble reflected all sorts of worlds, reflecting the emotions of countless people. It was as if each bubble represented the life and death of countless worlds. The tide of chaos stood above the ocean. In front of him was Lianping, who had fallen into a deep sleep. The thoughts of the four worlds appeared as a green light sphere that was the size of a fist. It floated on Chaos Tide's shoulder and asked, "He's dreaming?" "It's a dream, but it's also not a dream." The Tide of Chaos explained, "With Baihe's current power, every dream can be a real world, even if it's just an unconscious dream. With the little bit of power they leak when they turn over in their sleep, it's enough to build a real world. There's no difference between reality and dreams to them." "I don't understand. If Bai wants to integrate Lianping into it, then why does he have to go through so much trouble?" The Tide of Chaos laughed. "Can you kill your own thoughts? Be it humans or any other living creatures, there are countless thoughts, thoughts, consciousness, and choices that are born at every moment. We're unable to kill these thoughts and choices themselves. When two choices appear at the same time and we choose one of them, it can only be some sort of coincidence, probability, or variable that convinces us, even if this variable is very subtle. It's like what to eat for lunch or what to wear tomorrow. When we make a choice, there's always a reason. Even if there are times when these reasons are hidden in our subconscious, even if we don't realize it. It's the same for Bai and Lianping. Chaos Tide's smile was filled with excitement. When all the Lianpings from countless timelines are stacked together, it'll be the gathering of all the Lianpings. It'll be the real Lianping. It's just like in any timeline, the 10-year-old Lianping and the 20-year-old Lianping are stacked together. They'll be a part of the real Lianping. They're like two different thoughts and different choices. They're not separated but one. And now, if one of the thoughts wants to convince the other, it can only be done with the passage of time. The changes in external parameters will allow the 10-year-old Lianping to gradually become the 20-year-old Lianping. It's just like a snake crawling on a timeline. Every point on the timeline is a part of the snake. Their entire gathering is the real snake and cannot be looked at separately. Their current situation is similar to this. But even so, the power that Bai possesses still gives him an absolute advantage. Green light flashed on the body of the thought of the foreworld. He said hesitantly, "Then what should we do?" "Green, don't you understand?" Chaos Tide laughed out loud. "The game has already begun. Just when most of the high-level existences in the multiverse have yet to realize it. Now let's make this game that's related to gods and humans, time and space, and the balance of the entire multiverse more exciting, and let the seeds of chaos take root and sprout." Chapter 457. Half an hour later, Lianping walked out of the psychological consultation room slowly, his mind still replaying what the other party had said. "I'm not Lianping? I'm Chen Bin?" He didn't know when, but the memories of Chen Bin started to surface in his mind. Both his parents had passed away, but they had left him with a fortune of over 100 million. Even if he did not work for the rest of his life, he would still be able to live comfortably. Although he did not like to talk much, he was very popular among girls because of his net worth of over 100 million and his handsome face. It could be said that other than the fact that both his parents had passed away, Chen Bin was a complete winner in life. The two types of memories intertwined together, making Lianping feel very uncomfortable. As Lianping walked toward the room, he started to think about the situation before him. If this is some kind of attack, then it means that my memories have been affected as well. I can't trust all my memories completely. That female doctor was right. If I want to prove the authenticity of my past memories, the best way is to use some of my abilities. But if the other party can really attack my memories, then it's only logical that I can't use those abilities. Thinking of this, Lianping suddenly recalled the conversation between the two girls in the classroom. He took out his phone and started to search for information about Lianping. In the past, he had always used his mind to search for information on the phone and the internet. It had been many years since he last used his fingers to go online, so Lianping was still not used to it. However, there was a lot of information about Lianping in this world. He merely entered the name Lianping into the search engine and countless news articles popped up. At the top was the news that the police had arrested the retired soldier, Lianping. Has he been arrested? All sorts of information started to flash in Lianping's mind. Although he could not use many of his surreal skills, he still had many of the martial arts, combat, infiltration, and even computer skills, intelligence gathering, interrogation, and other knowledge he had learned. According to that female doctor, this was because after he had fallen into fantasy, he had also switched to some kind of academic syndrome, allowing him to quickly learn any kind of knowledge. It was to satisfy his fantasy that he had learned all sorts of knowledge. Regardless of whether what he said is true or not, at least these things are useful now. 3 days later, at night, Danyang City Detention Center. A figure quickly approached the corner of the wall. With a wave of his hands, he sent a grappling hook to the edge of the wall. Then, he grabbed the grappling hook and flipped over the wall of the detention center. Li Anping had made sufficient preparations in advance. Not only did he prepare the structure of the detention center, but he also prepared the location of the murderer, Li Anping, and the equipment he needed. Everything was done with ease and familiarity. Everything was so natural that he was even more certain of his judgment. The memories in his dream were definitely real. Even without the help of superpowers, even if his strength and speed were only in the range of an ordinary person, he was still like a ghost in the dark night, freely moving through the shadows of the detention center. Arriving at the cell in the deepest part of the detention center, Li Anping took out the key he had just stolen and opened the iron door. A man was sitting quietly on a chair with his head lowered. Even when the door of the cell was opened, he did not react at all. Li Anping slowly walked up to the man. "You're Li Anping?" "Li Anping, I've given you countless chances to choose, but you've always chosen the same stupid path." A cold and bone-chilling voice rang out from all directions. Li Anping took a few steps back, looked at the man who still had his head lowered, and asked, "Are you the one talking?" The man finally raised his head. His deep gaze and pale skin were exactly the same as Li Anping's. Seeing this man appear, Li Anping did not reveal any expression of surprise or panic. He only said calmly, "So, you're the one who brought me here." The man did not pay him any heed and continued to speak. "In this lifetime, I've given you several 100 million worth of wealth. You could have lived an ordinary life happily, but you still chose to continue on the path of darkness." Li Anping frowned and did not say anything. He drew out the dagger at his waist and walked up. Then, with a p sound, he stabbed the dagger into the man's chest. Fresh blood gushed out from the man's chest. He only opened his mouth and smiled, then spat out more blood. Looking at the man who had collapsed into a pool of blood, Li Anping wiped his dagger and suddenly turned his gaze toward the corner of the wall. There, another man with the same appearance slowly walked out from the wall. "Don't waste your energy. In this battle, the only outcome you can achieve is a draw or a loss. It's impossible for you to win." "Is he able to use supernatural powers in this world?" Li Anping's frown deepened. "This means to say that I was dragged into this world by him? I just don't know how much of the original body I was dragged into is, or am I just a clone?" There was too little information, and the enemy before him had an absolute advantage. This made it hard for Li Anping to come up with an effective conclusion. The other party ignored Li Anping and continued to speak. "Do you want this life? Then I'll give it to you." At the next moment, Li Anping's vision turned black. When he opened his eyes again, he was already sitting in a prison cell wearing a prisoner's uniform. Another memory gushed out from the depths of his mind. Li Anping, a Special Forces soldier who had returned home to visit his family, had also obtained the ability of black. He had chosen to eat those people who were brain dead or were about to be euthanized, and then used this power to silently help others. However, this was the beginning of his tragedy. After saving others time and time again, he continued to expose his extraordinary strength and speed. It was impossible for the country to tolerate such personal law enforcement. However, he still insisted on not killing anyone. He only helped the weak and captured criminals. Due to the scarcity of food sources and the increase in the country's military forces, he was eventually captured. Under the operation of the upper echelons, he was sentenced to death on the surface. However, in reality, he would be sent to a laboratory very soon. The upper echelons were very interested in his superhuman speed, strength, self-healing, and especially his ability to not age. "This is..." Li Anping pressed down on his head and asked. "These are our memories." The man's cold voice rang out in Lianping's ears. Humans are a type of chaotic, emotional creatures who can't even control their own desires. Their existence can't even be considered as a bacterium in the entire universe. Sacrifices made for them are meaningless. Lianping let out a few breaths, digesting the memories in his mind, and said, "It's because of this that we need to guide them." Guide? The other party smiled. "Why don't you just put them in a bottle? Countless millennia have passed, and tens of thousands of civilizations in the universe have walked toward prosperity and decline. However, humans have never learned their lesson. Their lifespans are too short, and they are unable to understand the truth of this universe. Wars, natural disasters, internal strife, and verbal abuse. They keep repeating the mistakes their ancestors made. Take the East and West continents under your feet as an example. The resources they have invested in weapons are enough to destroy the entire planet several hundred times. If these resources were invested in the space sector, they would have solved the problem of territory, resources, and population long ago. Do such violent, easily angered, belligerent, selfish, chaotic creatures really have the right to become the rulers of the multivariate universe? Lianping said coldly, then modify them. If their lifespans are insufficient, let them live forever. If their resources are insufficient, let them take over countless universes. Then get rid of their personality flaws, and let them become the gods of the multivariate universe. Can such creatures still be considered humans? There are so many living creatures in the multivariate universe. If we were to modify them, how would they be different from humans? The other party said slowly, "Moreover, do you think that the things you're thinking of, the things you're doing now, have you never done them before? Humans have never been able to support the mud on the wall." As the other party spoke, the prison cell shattered, and the surroundings changed once again. It was a paddy field under the setting sun, and a young man was curiously picking up a ring. With this scene, countless memories once again gushed into Lianping's mind. The year 1900 was a chaotic era, and the entire Red Country had sunk into madness. Colonization, feudalism, revolution, riots, ignorance. Everything had set this country, which had a long history, ablaze. In this chaotic era, in a paddy field, a young man by the name of Li Erniu had obtained a ring. There was an ancient demon residing in the ring, and the demon had given him the ability to devour humans and become stronger. From then on, the entire Red Country, no, the entire world, had welcomed an unprecedented storm. At the very beginning, Li Erniu had joined the Imperial Court's army and became the court's #1 warrior. He had led the army to defeat the Eight-Nation Alliance. However, after a series of treaties were signed and lands were ceded, causing him to be extremely disappointed with the decadence of the Imperial Court. He had single-handedly killed the entire royal family in the capital, and then fled south to the southern part of the Red Country. Here, he had met a group of people who claimed to be revolutionaries. Li Erniu was quickly attracted by the theory that the other party had explained. Relying on Li Erniu's rapidly growing power, these revolutionaries quickly overthrew the local government's armed forces and massacred the foreign forces in the country. In just a short year, more than half of the Red Country had fallen into the hands of the revolutionaries. In the following year, the enraged and evil foreign forces had sent out the armed navy of the 16 countries. However, when they reached the territorial waters of the Red Country, they were quickly turned into huge ruins under Li Erniu's iron fists. The entire world began to be shocked by Li Erniu's power. Everyone began to know that in the distant eastern lands, a demon had been born. However, all the fortresses had been conquered from the inside. The sudden power and wealth quickly caused the upper echelons of the revolutionaries to become depraved. Seeing how the humans were so vulnerable under the corrosion of money and power, and seeing how the people had returned to their previous days of suffering, Li Erniu's eyes were filled with despair. At this moment, a person who claimed to be from the Red Country found Li Erniu and began to tell him about the communist ideology. When Liurnius saw it, he was shocked and killed all the corrupt upper echelons at the revolutionaries' ball that night. Then, he joined the Red Country and vowed to turn the entire world into a communist society. This time, he decided not to just be a thug. He wanted to personally complete the global Scarlet transformation. Thus, a red demon was born in the land of the East. Chapter 458. Along with Chaos Tide's attack, countless worlds started to change. Jiuquan Continent, No Thoughts Country, Timing City. In City Lord Li Ruishan's house, Li Ruishan was pacing back and forth anxiously. Hearing the voices of his wife and the midwife in the room, his face was filled with anxiety. Today was the day of his wife's labor. 4 hours had passed, but the child in his wife's womb still hadn't come out. How could he not be anxious? At this moment, even though he had the power to overturn rivers and seas, he had no way to deal with a woman giving birth to a child. At this moment, the midwife in the room shouted, "It's out! It's a young master!" However, before Li Ruishan could feel happy, he heard the midwife's panicked voice again. "This is bad. Why isn't the young master crying?" Although Li Ruishan wasn't a doctor, he knew that a baby would start to breathe with their own lungs after birth. The first cry was a sign that the lungs had opened up. Hearing this, he immediately rushed in and saw the midwife patting the child's back. She said anxiously, "If you don't cry out, the child won't be able to live on." The midwife's palm patted the baby's back again. The child opened his eyes, and endless light shot out from his eyes. Along with his first cry, all the zero-point vacuum energy in the endless void space reached its peak at this moment. The entire Jiuquan continent seemed to have turned into an annihilation reactor. In just 5 seconds, the entire continent had disappeared. Ha 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 ha. The thought of the 4 worlds could not help but laugh out loud. This guy is too violent. He destroyed his own hometown the moment he was born. Chaos Tide frowned. His power is too strong. It seems that we can't completely replicate his consciousness algorithm. There'll have to be some deletions. It won't do if he's too young. His brain is too delicate and it'll go berserk easily. After saying that, an even stronger green light enveloped Lianping's figure. More worlds were invaded by Chaos Tide. On Mount Tai, thousands of martial artists gathered in a circle and stared at the man in the center with hostility. Although the man's sideburns were white, his face was handsome, and he had the appearance of an elegant scholar. However, his hands, feet, chest, back, thighs, and waist were all filled with various saber, sword, wound, and protruding bones. If ordinary people were to be in this state, they would have fainted long ago. However, not only was the man not dead, he was still standing perfectly fine. His hands were very steady, and there was a faint smile on his face, as if the injuries on his body were so insignificant. It was just this faint smile and a pair of steady fists that made the more than 1,000 martial artists in the area hesitate to move forward. He laughed out loud and said, "You heroes, don't you want to exterminate the devil? Don't you want to exterminate the devil and defend Tao? Now that I'm here, why aren't you guys coming?" Ba. A big monk came out and said with a sorrowful look, "Benefactor Dongfang, lay down the butcher's knife and become a Buddha on the spot. If you are willing to enter Buddhism and live out your remaining years in Shaolin Temple with a lamp in front of the Buddha." Wait a minute, does the Shaolin Temple want to monopolize Dongfang Bai's 9-yang divine art? A man with a 9-ringed broadsword said. Ba, Benefactor's words are wrong. The Shaolin Temple has 1,000 years of history and 72 divine art. Why would you covet a mere 9-yang divine art? You may know a person for a long time without understanding their true nature. Who knows what you guys are thinking? Seeing the group of people in front of him arguing about his martial arts, Dongfang Bai laughed again and said, "You moralists and hypocrites, why do you have to be so secretive? The reason you surrounded me this time was because you obeyed the orders of that dog emperor, Kublai. He was afraid that I would seek revenge on him one day and destroy his Deyuan kingdom, so he sent a group of lackeys to kill me. The other reason is that you coveted my 9-yang divine art. At this point, a green light suddenly flashed in his eyes, and an unprecedented understanding appeared in his mind. All kinds of data, memories, and truths kept flashing in his mind. The 9-yang divine art that he had learned since he was young became so worthless at this moment. Not only did he master the entire 9-yang divine art in a few seconds, but he also reached a higher level, reaching an unprecedented level. He looked at the martial artists in front of him and suddenly said, "You guys want the 9-yang divine art, right? Then I'll give it to you." Under the incredulous gazes of thousands of martial artists, Dongfang Bai slowly rose into the air. His hands were raised high and a truck-sized fireball was formed above his head. The area within a radius of 1,000 feet was as if it was in a furnace. The martial artists stared blankly at Dongfang Bai in the sky, sweating profusely. "This is the highest level of the 9-yang divine art that I just created, the 9-yang ion fire. If you want it, I'll give it to you." A light that was enough to blind ordinary people shrouded the peak of Mount Tai. On this day, the experts of the Shaolin Temple, the Chuanjin sect, the Qingqing sect, the Giant Whale sect, and dozens of other sects all died at Dongfang Bai's hands. The martial arts world was in a state of panic. 10 days later, Dongfang Bai went straight to the capital of the Yuan dynasty alone and killed 100,000 cavalrymen with 3 palms. Then, he went straight to the palace and chopped off Kublai's dog head, becoming a martial arts legend. Some people said that he broke through the void in the end, while others said that he went berserk during cultivation and died on Changbai Mountain. Some even said that he was assassinated by the remnants of the Yuan dynasty and died from poison. But no one knew what the real result was, and no one cared. What the martial artists were more concerned about was whether Dongfang Bai had left the 9-yang divine art behind, and where it was if he had left it behind. Only Dongfang Bai himself knew that he was no longer Dongfang Bai. He was Li Anping, the ruler of the Xia, the king of mankind. As his power continued to increase and his memories continued to recover, with the help of the tide of chaos, he finally connected to his original body. It was not just Dongfang Bai's world. Thousands of worlds were changing. The seeds left behind by the tide of chaos were injected with Li Anping's consciousness algorithm, and then they blossomed and bore fruit. In a distant time and space, in a galaxy called the Great Cross Tomb, the young Victor Li participated in an interstellar war. On the battlefield, he tore apart his own mech with his bare hand. Then, under everyone's incredulous gaze, he used an unprecedented burst of super gamma rays to vaporize the entire Great Cross Tomb nebula. Then, he spent 10 years unifying the entire galaxy. In another time and space, a meteorite the size of the Pacific Ocean was hurtling toward Earth. The governments of the world united. After trying various means such as nuclear bombs, lasers, explosions, and so on, the meteorite was still heading toward Earth. But in the last hour of Earth's destruction, a middle-aged man, Song Pingon, wearing a courier's uniform, soared into the sky. Under the live broadcast of countless military satellites, he smashed the meteorite with one punch, turning an unprecedented apocalyptic disaster into a beautiful meteor shower that spread across the entire planet. An unprecedented superhero was born. In another time and space, the 10 great Taoist sects besieged the Northern Demon sect. Just as the entire upper echelon of the Northern Demon sect was massacred and the Northern Demon sect, which had been established for tens of thousands of years, was about to be destroyed, a demon sect disciple named Li Bao stepped forward and used a unique skill known as the Great Ivan 9999 combo to kill the masters of the 3,000 Taoist sects. From then on, he was known as the most evil demon in history, and the cultivation method he used was also known as the legendary strongest cultivation method of the demon sect. The Great Ivan 9999 combo, a move that was close to the gods, also became a dark cloud in the hearts of Buddhism and Taoism. But unfortunately, since Li Bao's ascension, no one in the demon sect could reach the height of 9999 combo. Those who could reach 10 or 20 combo were already unprecedented geniuses. One consciousness after another connected to Li Anping's body. A strange feeling of being in a different universe and a different timeline rushed into his brain. Chapter 459. A timeline represented a complete world, and the countless forks of a timeline, their gathering represented a universe. Then the forks in a timeline were like a tree. A tree represented a universe, and an entire forest represented the endless multiverse. If it was said that when Li Anping and the other three top-notch warriors from the Four Worlds thoughts they were fighting on a timeline like a snake crawling on a tree branch, then right now Li Anping, who was connected by the thousands and tens of thousands of clones, could sense that he was existing on a myriad of forks in timeline. He was like a stretch of huge vines, tangled up on the branches of a large forest. He was existing in different universes and different spacetime. At this moment, regardless of whether it was the past or the future, they were all present to him. He took a step forward and became a higher dimensional creature. After Liurnia disappeared, the entire Earth sank into chaos due to the vacuum of power. The two of them stood on the moon together, looking at the blue planet before them, taking in all the dark matters amidst the chaos of war. Do you understand? Without us, humans are nothing. They are a race without hope, our outdated toys. His palm patted Li Anping's shoulder gently. You should have grown up. You should abandon these toys from when you were young. Li Anping turned his head, and countless data gushed out like a waterfall in his eyes. Abundant power kept on gushing out from his body. The tides of chaos. The man frowned. What a busybody! Li Anping lifted one of his fingers, and it emitted endless red light. Right now, he, who was existing in countless worlds at the same time, had instantly grown into a 10th-dimensional creature with the help of the tides of chaos. Other than the multivariate universe itself, there were no boundaries that he could not break through. Timelines and timelines, worlds and worlds, universes and universes, everything was so clearly displayed in front of him. The knowledge of various worlds kept on gushing into his mind. Magic, martial arts, immortal arts, technology, superpowers. All of them were in his mind. If Li Anping were to do it himself, it might take him many years. However, the seeds planted by the tide of chaos in advance saved him a lot of hard work. Although this accumulation couldn't compare to the man in front of him, it was enough for Li Anping to use his own power in this unfamiliar space and time. He could use the power that had increased by 2 to the power of 378 times over the past 7 years. The red light on his finger covered the entire planet at a speed of 300,000 kilometers per second. At this moment, a cultivation technique appeared in the hearts of everyone in the world. Li Anping had just spent 0.0013 seconds to create a cultivation method. Li Anping calmly said to the man beside him, "This set of sterile morality technique is just right for this planet." To practice this technique, the higher the proletarian ideology in your heart, the more morality you have, and the stronger your strength will be. The more evil and selfish thoughts one had, the weaker one's strength would be. Even if you're originally a proletarian, if you fall one day, your strength will quickly decline. The more you fall, the more strength you lose. Then, Li Anping's palm moved gently. It looked like he was treating the earth as a basketball. He pressed his palm on it and moved it. The entire earth spun quickly with his move, and time was compressed again. Another 50 years had passed. At this time, everyone on Earth had learned the sterile morality technique. The strongest among the humans were called One Punch, Two Fingers, Three Swords, and Four Blades. They had all reached the highest level of the sterile morality technique, the Crimson Sun Glory Realm. When they used the technique, their entire body turned red. Not only were they invulnerable to weapons, water, and fire, but they also had the power to topple mountains and overturn seas, and the speed of lightning. Even their lifespan could reach 200 years. As for those who had evil thoughts and were selfish, they would not be able to obtain power from the isekai morality technique. Not only would they not be able to obtain power, but if they were to forcefully cultivate the isekai morality technique, their bodies would become weaker and weaker. If they continued to forcefully cultivate it, they might even die. This was a hell for evil people. Because all the good people had become superhumans, the evil people would only become weaker and weaker. However, the man on the moon looked at the blue planet beneath his feet and sneered, "Human justice is the most boring thing in the universe. Even if the world was controlled by the most righteous and selfless person, would it really be good?" He opened his hands and made a magnifying gesture. Various images of Earth began to appear before his eyes. Humans make mistakes. This has nothing to do with whether they have evil or selfless thoughts. The stronger the person, the greater the mistake they make. On the heavenly orbit, the second strongest human, Lin Guoxiong, who was known as Two Fingers, turned into a red light and looked coldly at the heavenly orbit in front of him. As he used the sterile longevity finger, the heavenly orbit, which was more than 10 kilometers in radius, fell into endless explosions. Then, he turned into a red light and circled the heavenly orbit, which was used by humans to control the climate, the environment, and disasters, gradually collapsed. Just as he was destroying the heavenly orbit, the other two strongest human beings, Zhang Aishi, who was known as One Punch, and Three Swords Zhao Wuchan, who was ranked third, also turned into red light and chased after Lin Guoxiong. Faced with the pursuit of two experts of the same level, Lin Guoxiong surrendered. He said righteously, "Today you think that I'm a sinner of the human race. I have nothing to say, but time will prove that I'm right." Then, without any resistance, he was sentenced to life imprisonment. The man said, "He thinks that the heavenly orbit destroyed the ecological balance, so he destroyed the heavenly orbit and brought natural disasters back to the human race. Let's not talk about whether he's right or wrong. He just pointed out a problem, which is that your way can't solve the omnipresent conflicts in the human world." As he explained, the scene began to change again. In this society dominated by the sterile morality technique, the more powerful the person, the more weight his words had. But power alone couldn't determine right or wrong. Moreover, no matter how righteous they were, there would still be different standpoints, contradictions, and conflicts. Some experts thought that technology wasn't good enough and wanted humans to return to nature, so they sent their subordinates into the mountains. Some experts hoped that the whole world would become reinforced concrete, believing that man could conquer nature. These two groups of people would naturally have conflict. Some experts had a strong sense of nationality, believing that countries should be maintained and that every race had a need to exist. They should be divided and governed, and different policies should be implemented according to different races. Some experts thought that the whole world should be integrated, and there should no longer be differences between countries and regions. Obviously, they would also have conflict. Some experts liked kittens and puppies, while some experts loved cat and dog meat. The former thought that kittens and puppies were life, and they were the companions of humans. The latter thought that animals were the same as plants, and they were just a kind of human resource. In this era of abundant resources, protecting animals was meaningless, because humans could synthesize a large number of animals at any time. Small issues such as whether tofu pudding should be eaten sweet or salty, and big issues such as national economy and military planning, the planet was full of conflicts. What was worse was that the experts who cultivated the sterile morality technique would always think that what they did was right and righteous because of the righteousness in their hearts and because of the morality they abided by. This made them especially difficult to convince, and there were even situations where they relied on their own power to do what they thought was right. Lin Guoxiong was a typical example, and such a powerhouse could cause even more damage than those villains. Looking at the man's constantly changing scenes and the man's words, Lianping reached out his hand and pressed it against the planet. The entire planet came to a standstill, as if time had stopped. Since there's a flaw, I'll just fix it for him. Chapter 460. The entire planet began to spin in reverse. Li Anping and the man returned to the day when the Akashic morality technique was created. The red light continued to spread across the entire planet. The Akashic morality technique's heart mantra appeared in everyone's mind. This time, those who practice the Akashic morality technique will not only obtain supreme power, but they will also gradually approach absolute rationality as their power grows. The entire world will also achieve the same concept of justice, and there will be no conflicts in the world. The next moment, as Li Anping's words ended, the planet began to spin again, and time began to pass again. As Li Anping changed the timeline twice, with the birth of the Akashic morality technique, the timeline bifurcated, and two new parallel worlds were born with the Akashic morality technique. The two of them were in the second parallel world, looking at the changes that occurred on Earth 50 years later due to the new Akashic morality technique. This world had one thing in common with the previous parallel world. In this world, all humans also practiced the Akashic morality technique, and the villains were still at the bottom of society, and had nothing to show for it. The only difference was that the powerhouses at the top of this world's power were all existences that were infinitely close to absolute rationality. The higher the rationality, the weaker their emotions. In other words, this was a world where the stronger the power, the colder the relationship between people, and the more lacking in personality. For the weak, that is to say, for the ordinary people who lack justice and have too much selfishness, this is a terrifying world. The man dragged the space in front of him, and brought Li Anping to different corners of this world. Everyone wore similar clothes, and most of them did similar work every day. Those powerhouses have the same concept of justice, the same rationality. Under their alliance, ordinary humans have no way to resist. Rationality also represents cruelty. The man mumbled, to ensure the survival of humans, to maintain the only rule, and to eliminate the conflicts between humans. More and more things were deemed unnecessary by them, and were eliminated by these absolutely rational people. In the beginning, it was cultural and entertainment. All kinds of forbidden films that could only be watched by those above 18 years old, and all kinds of animations, novels, and movies related to cannibalism, bloodshed, and abuse were banned by the higher-up. Then there were weapons used in all kinds of wars. In order to control the power in their own hands and reduce the damage caused to each other by ordinary people who hadn't reached the realm of rationality, all weapons were destroyed. Then, as the personalities of the upper echelons continued to diminish, they became increasingly unable to understand the feelings and desires of ordinary people. They began to eliminate all kinds of things that could cause conflicts between humans, eliminating all kinds of things that they thought humans did not need or things that they thought were harmful to humans. Because the upper echelons shared the same view of justice, they were like the same person who held the greatest power, so no one could stop them. This situation became more and more intense. From the earliest bloody and violent movies to action movies, from weapons to various kinds of cutlery, and even overly intense songs and music were considered to be provocative. The entire human world gradually turned cold. The ordinary people who had their weapons and related technology destroyed wanted to fight against the higher-up. However, the only way to do so was to cultivate the arcana morality technique. As long as they continued to cultivate the arcana morality technique, they would continue to approach absolute rationality and the upper echelons of humanity. As more and more people cultivated the arcana morality technique to a high level, the entire planet began to descend into a cultural desert. Everyone was becoming more and more like a cog in human society, gradually losing their colors. In the end, most people's feelings would become more and more indifferent. Perhaps your best friend is still having fun with you today, but after a few months, his arcana morality technique had a breakthrough and he would treat you as an ordinary passerby. Therefore, a portion of the ordinary people began to give up on cultivating the arcana morality technique in an attempt to return society to a warm society. However, in front of the arcana morality technique cultivators, this group of people naturally became the cancer of society, a stumbling block that hindered the development of humanity. Because feelings are one of the causes of all conflict. The scene changed again. Rows of men and women in prison uniforms lined up and were killed by the warriors who cultivated the arcana morality technique. The red marks' battle aura directly pierced through their foreheads and took away their lives. In the beginning, it was the most ferocious prisoners. Those murderers, anti-socialists, perverts, the scum of scum. They would never be able to cultivate the arcana morality technique. Countless attempts to change their minds did not work. Therefore, they were the first batch to be slaughtered. They were abandoned. Following the man's words, more and more men and women of all ages appeared on the screen. They began to line up to be slaughtered. Their eyes were filled with despair, sorrow, and fear. The warriors who slaughtered them were as cold as robots. There was no emotion in their eyes. No matter how many humans they killed, it was difficult to leave a trace in the hearts of these super-rational and emotionless warriors. After all the prisoners were killed, more and more ordinary people who could not cultivate the arcana morality technique, or those who refused to cultivate the technique, were sent to the execution platform. Just like how inferior genes were eliminated, those who were naturally evil, or those who had less righteousness and selflessness in their genes, were infinitely close to zero as they were slaughtered rationally. Just like in natural evolution, creatures that were not suitable for the environment were gradually eliminated. On this planet, evil, emotional, and chaotic were all factors that were not suitable for the environment. The remaining people were more suitable for the arcana morality technique, more suitable for this society. When almost all the members of the human race entered a super-rational state, their speed of development also entered an unprecedented state. As the man's hand gradually moved the earth, under the rapidly spinning earth, the speed of time was accelerated again and again. Red dots gradually spread across the entire universe. The entire human society was becoming more rational. Their emotions were infinitely indifferent. The only thing that remained in their hearts was the instinct to reproduce and develop. They were like humanoid robots, glowing with red light as they occupied the starry skies one after another. Such a cold, cruel, and absolutely rational human world, is it the world you want? Lianping, do you think that we have not tried all your experiments and ideas? We have tried everything possible. The man looked at Lianping and said, So, you still don't understand? What you want isn't a perfect human world. There's no such thing as a perfect world in this world. If you want to be happy and blissful, you have to endure chaos and conflict. There's only darkness when there's light. If you want the entire world to maintain light, you have to let yourself become that light, letting yourself manage the human society forever. Using your own powers, you can forcefully distort reality and create a world where there's only bliss and no sorrow. However, as long as you continue to maintain your emotions, there'll be a day when you'll get sick of this utopian game. There's a time limit to emotions. After 100,000 years, a million years, or even billions of years, when you've gotten sick of this game and become utterly disappointed with humans, this game will collapse and head toward all sorts of crazy states. In order to maintain this society and this utopian country forever, you'll abandon your emotions and turn yourself into a machine, into the root, and into the heavenly axiom. Then you, who are in an absolutely rational state, will abandon humans at the first instant. It's because you know that what you're doing is meaningless other than satisfying your emotions. Regardless of which choice you make, humans will eventually be abandoned by us. They'll forever be in the cycle of good and evil. Chapter 461. Lianping stared at the man before him and asked, "Who are you?" "No, you. What exactly are you?" "The first demonic god in the multivariate universe, the strongest under the ultimate level," the man said calmly. "The first cause, heavenly axiom, origin, primordial, God, king of demons, god of gods. Many people refer to me by various names. However, the other demonic gods all call me White, or the colorless and formless origin." "Colorless and formless origin," Lianping repeated slowly. The other party continued, "However, these aren't me or our real names. You should understand that I'm you and you're me. I'm Lianping, the ruler of all living things and the source of the world." The colorless and formless origin, the first demonic god in the land of White, was Lianping, who had achieved quantum immortality. He had integrated himself from countless parallel worlds and continued to expand on timelines, merging in the multivariate universe. The reason why he had become the first demonic god in the land of White was very simple. It was because most demonic gods had broken through the dimensional barrier and could move about on timelines, existing in both the past and the future at the same time. To them, both the past and the future were the present. The stronger their ability to move through timelines, the further they could return to the past and the longer the timelines they could exist in. For example, the Four Worlds Thoughts was 10 meters long, 10 meters wide, and 10 meters tall. He had existed in the timelines for 5 billion years. Then the colorless and formless origins time attributes after the length, width, and height were over 5 billion years. For example, he had appeared earlier than the Four Worlds Thoughts in the past 10 billion years. They were like snakes crawling on timelines. The stronger the demonic god, the longer the timelines they occupied. Therefore, among the 12 demonic gods, the stronger they were, the earlier they were born. It was not that the earlier they were born, the stronger they were. Although they appeared to be the same in terms of results, the reasons behind them were different. The colorless and formless origin's power was second to none among the 12 demonic gods, and he had existed in the longest timelines. He was also the first demonic god in the land of White. In that case, you were also the one who instigated the war between the 12 demonic gods? Hearing the formless origin frankly admit its identity, Lianping asked the question in his heart. That's right. The existence of a few of the 12 demon gods is detrimental to the multiverse, and at the same time, it also lacks the possibility of communication. Therefore, I instigated a war and exiled the 5 demon god. Looking at himself, Lianping shook his head and said, "Colorless, formless origin, you're not me. You're just a monster swallowed by emptiness. And now that I know who you are, I have nothing to talk to you about." With that, Lianping put out his palm. With a push of his palm, the space particles in the universe kept on compressing. Every piece of shattered space kept on shrinking. Lianping learned the abilities of the 33 paradises almost instantly and even surpassed them. With a slight stretch of his hand, he touched the earth before him. Under the compression of space, the earth turned into the size of an apple and was held by Lianping on his palm. Streams of white light extended out from the surface of the colorless and formless origin's body. His eyes, ears, mouth, and nose were all filled with streams of white light. he said coldly. Do you want to make a move? No, it's just that after I verified your identity, I understood a problem. The corners of Li Anping's lips curled up slightly. Firstly, as an existence that has been completely quantized, your consciousness algorithm is absolutely rational. You have no emotions, nor do you have the so-called pity, complacency, fury, sadness, or other emotions. Therefore, although your powers are many times stronger than mine, you still didn't use your powers to suppress me. This can only mean one thing: you're unable to do it. Otherwise, you wouldn't have said so much nonsense to me. In fact, after thinking about it, I understood. We're like different thoughts in the same body. We're unable to kill each other, so you chose to convince me. However, you've made a second mistake. You, who are absolutely rational, shouldn't have said so many philosophical things like before. It's because you've simulated a human personality in an attempt to convince me. It's like you've created a simulated personality to act as a translator between us. Therefore, everything you said earlier was just to convince me. It's because it's impossible for you, who are absolutely rational, to say such things. The white light from the colorless and formless origin gradually weakened as he said calmly, Even so, you'll never be able to solve the problems of humans. If they want to have happiness, they'll have to have pain. If they want to have feelings, they'll definitely have conflict. The current me is unable to do this. Creating an ideal country where there's only happiness and no sadness, a divine country filled with happiness and without any conflicts. This is something that the current me is unable to do. Unless I use my powers to interfere with their consciousness, no high-level existence in the multivariate universe will be able to do this. However, I've thought of a solution. A solution? It's impossible for such a solution to exist in the universe. The colorless and formless origin said, any of your attempts are destined to fail and be meaningless. No, there's still one solution that you haven't tried, Li Anping said slowly. That impossible possibility. Omniscient, omnipotent, and omnipresent. It'll be fine as long as you become the ultimate. Ultimate. The colorless and formless origin was stunned for a moment before saying coldly, do you know what the ultimate represents? You won't understand even if I tell you. It's not like you're the ultimate. As Li Anping spoke, his figure slowly disappeared. After verifying the other party's existence, Fang Xinjian spoke without holding back. It was because he knew that the absolutely rational colorless and formless origin would definitely not get angry because of insults or contempt. He did not even have the ability to get angry. The colorless and formless origin frowned. Where are you going? Of course I'm going back. You won't be able to convince me for at least 1,000 or 1,000 years. I won't get sick of playing with humans during this 1,000 or 1,000 years. Li Anping's body started to dissipate completely from his legs. In the end, only his head was left. During these 1,000 or 1,000 years, as long as I'm able to show the possibility of reaching the ultimate, as an absolutely rational existence, you won't have any unnecessary sadness, anger, or any other emotions. You'll naturally take the initiative to fuse into my body and give up on the path of quantum immortality. And since you think that I'll give up on humanity one day and abandon my emotions, then as an absolutely rational being, you won't waste your time and energy to suppress or exile me. It's because I'm not like the 5 demonic gods that you've exiled, who are extremely harmful to the multivariate universe. Seeing that the last of Li Anping's head had also disappeared completely, the colorless and formless origin's countenance turned increasingly cold, just like a robot's. He wiped out the simulated personality and once again appeared as an absolutely rational being. Faced with Li Anping's words, he did not respond. There was no anger, no pity, and no pursuit. It was because it was unnecessary and meaningless. Therefore, there was no need for him to take action or react. He did not even say anything and just disappeared. When Li Anping once again appeared on Earth, It had been an entire year since Earth had been engulfed in the flames of war. You're tuning in to the Phoenix Nights YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.